18th work session meeting. We welcome the members of the public who are in person and who may be watching our usual video feed online. Hybrid council meetings allow people to join online through WebEx or in person at the city and county building. We continue to watch COVID rates to make the safest choice for all of us. Masks are no longer required in city facilities, but attendees who prefer to continue using a mask are welcome to do so. We will continue to monitor the situation and take any reasonable precautions for the public and staff. As many of you know, there is no public comment during the work session. However, the City Council has begun its budget discussions regarding Mayor Mendenhall's proposed budget for fiscal year 2022 to 23. Tonight at 7 p.m., the Council will be holding its first out of two budget public hearings to allow the public to weigh in on the mayor's recommended budget. Plus, the public is welcome to share comments on any general comments. Our agendas for the next several weeks will be focused on reviewing the proposed budget for each city department, along with a second public hearing opportunity to comment on the mayor's recommended budget for the fiscal year 22 to 23, scheduled for Tuesday, June 7th. But please know your feedback is always welcome, and you can share with the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, 84114, or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or calling our 24-hour phone comment line, 801-535-7654. Scott will be moderating today's meeting. And as always, we start off our work sessions with an informational update from the administration. And I have Rachel sitting in for the mayor at this time. And I have Andrew also here in attendance. And Weston.
Mr. Chair, we're having
And just
talk amongst ourselves.
I look very. It's just like I like scan it and respond to the stuff that I got to.
we have our video.
Okay.
Rachel, the time is yours.
Thank you, Council Chair. Thank you, Council members, for giving us this time, as always. We have our regular few slides for you. Maybe. Hopefully today. Do we have the slides today? Not sure if it's Taylor or Scott.
Hold the slides, please.
Sorry, Taylor, what did you say?
Oh, I was just seeing if Scott could pull up the slides.
Oh,
but I
Scott
can-
has them, okay.
You want me to start talking?
Yeah, go ahead and start.
Okay, good. I can do that. So the first slide I have for you, if we see them, we have a sad benchmark that we've hit in the U.S. recently, which I'm sure you've all heard of, that we now have 1 million people in the U.S. that have died from COVID-19. In Utah, that translates to over 4,700 people, with 1,600 of them being from
Mr.
Salt Lake
Chair.
County.
Sorry, Rachel. We can't hear you very well.
Oh,
Can you
yeah.
pull the microphone closer? Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks. How's that?
Interrupt.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so so that is, obviously something that gives us some pause as we feel like we're partly coming out of this pandemic, but also seeing some other increases that I wanted to note for you. We've seen in Utah a 76.5% increase in cases over the past 2 weeks, so that's pretty significant. However, hospitalizations and deaths are still low. So, we know, and again, we probably say this every week, that vaccinations and boosters are really effective. And despite the fact that more people are going to get infected with COVID, the risk of hospitalization from Omicron is reduced, according to the CDC, from a booster by 86% compared with only 65% reduction from a 2-dose vaccination. But despite the fact that all the evidence shows that boosters are incredibly effective, only about 29% of Utahns are boosted, which is really similar to the national trend, where only about 31% of people nationwide are actually boosted. So continue to hammer on that message that staying up to date on your vaccinations is the way to keep people out of the hospital. Next slide, please. So trending there, you'll actually see what I actually just remarked on, which is that kind of lower up-to-date vaccination number. In Salt Lake County, it's a little bit higher, so that, of course, tracks with our general vaccination status in Salt Lake County, too, being a bit higher. We have a marked increase in people being up to date on their vaccines this week, in Salt Lake County at least, but we're also seeing more people seeking emergency care than last week in our hospitals in Salt Lake County. So seeing a slight trend upward there. Next slide, please. And then this, I think, demonstrates the case identification over time. You see how, with those highs in February, we actually are seeing pretty concerning figures right now of people who are actually testing positive for the virus. Again, the important part is keeping people out of the hospital. But wanted to give you at least that visual of the new cases that we've identified in the last week and how that is kind of trending upward to that mid-February number. The wastewater data, which is on the next slide there, also shows some similar increases. And I gave you that statewide map just so you can kind of see that view of, how much red, I guess, we're seeing across the state. But the next slide, if you want to move to that, please, is the more detailed information on Salt Lake County or Salt Lake City. And we are now seeing an increasing trend in the wastewater data, which probably doesn't surprise you after what we just said. So there's an uptick there. So I think that means that we'll continue to see cases rise over the next several weeks. The trend on the right side of the slide there, this week I included the total data since April 2020 till now, just to give you kind of that overall picture of how we're seeing the wastewater data and those indicators tracked over the whole past couple of years. So any questions about the COVID data that we presented today? Not great news, but get boosted.
Just on the graph there, so we're pretty much where we were, say, last summer, springtime, as far as the wastewater. I'm looking at the bottom graph.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
I think next up we have Weston.
All right. Time for some community engagement highlights. Of course, there's our standard website of places, or the spot to go to see most of these engagement opportunities, and updates on any other ones that I've reported before. And civic engagement team is doing a great job to try to keep that up to date. It's a big job because there's a lot of engagement going on in the city at all times. But that we're trying to make that the go-to place for all of these things. Next slide. In transportation, we have 3 things to report. We've mentioned before the 1100 East reconstruction project continues with their engagement, the transportation team and engagement on that. They're doing a presentation to ELPCO on Thursday, May 26th, as they continue to do the outreach on that project that's well underway. Just starting in the process is the 2100 South reconstruction. There's no public outreach that's happening quite yet, other than some intercept surveys that's going to be done on May 20th and May 25th to start getting some public sentiment. But that project is just beginning. And then the canvassing of businesses and residents along Main Street from 700 South to 2100 South will be happening this Friday to inform them of the upcoming restriping that's going to be taking place this summer. Next slide. Public utilities, I think I've mentioned the watershed management plan before. They're doing a public open house, which I've misspelled on that, I can see, May 25th, and at the main library from 5 to 7 p.m. That, of course, is a plan that we are required to do, or the public utilities is required to do, to document our water, our source waters, and that they are protected in order to provide high-quality, safe drinking water to our city and other customers of our public utilities. And this is the overarching plan that does that, and they are doing public comment on that. The water reclamation facility is doing a couple of engagements, a virtual open house on May 26th, and then an in-person open house at Rose Park Elementary on June 2nd. And then, of course, you're fully aware of the public utility rate increases process with a public hearing tonight on that for the budget. Next slide. We have an update this time from Housing Stability, which is a new one this time. The Housing Stability Division will be accepting public comment on a proposed draft of projects and activities that are going to be undertaken with Home Investment Partnerships American Rescue Plan Act federal funds under the U.S. Department of HUD. The proposed plan and comments can be found through the city's Housing Stability Division website, www.slc.gov/housing stability, which at the moment that I did this, it was not linked from that original website. That's part of the process I'm trying to do, is to get all of these on that page, so we'll get that there as well. But that's it for me. Any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Next slide. First slide is the resource center capacity. You're looking at 97% capacity over the last week. Slightly up, but still very high as usual. Next slide. This is a slide you saw last time. I brought up a screenshot of the state dashboard on homeless services. In the next few weeks, hopefully in the next month, I'll say, the state hopes to release their new report for their annual report they do with all their outcome data to the public. And so I'd like to bring that to you all, make sure you're aware of that, and then we can talk about specific things maybe you'd like to see from that, the dashboard or that report, once your budget season's a little calmer after this. We also have a draft of the final report for the Ramada, the overflow in North Temple, and we'll have that to you as well, similar time frame. So you'll see what happened there, some numbers that may be interesting, helpful for you all to think through. Next slide. You'll see that there was a resource fair this past week at Fairmount Park, and you can see some of the numbers there. The Justice Court's been very active, obviously, with 19 engagement and 17 cases heard. Referral both to the in-between and also a separate referral for a mental health assessment. You'll see Utah Naloxone was there, UTA saw a lot of folks. Lunch was provided by a volunteer crew from the West Point Community Council and a Boy Scout troop, and then Rough Haven. And this coming Friday is Kayak Court on the Jordan River. And then as well, the County Health Department doesn't have any full abatements this week, but the Folsom Trail will have some attention done to it, cleaning, I believe tomorrow, I want to say. Next slide. And then this is something I know you've been asking about, the winter overflow shelter process for next year, 2023. The Council of Mayors, COM, has a subcommittee that's accepted options from various cities about places where an overflow could be located next winter. I believe at least 9 cities to this point, I believe, have submitted at least one location. That list is going to be reviewed this week by that subcommittee, and then there'll be some ranking done to present to the full council conference of mayors in June. And then July, they should vote to have a proposed site or sites. It could be multiple sites. In August, they want to make sure that they can get that in front of the Council of Governments, since by statute, COM was tasked with doing the process, but the Council of Governments needs to submit it to the state before September 1st, which is a deadline. And then if everything works well, October should be opening an option or options. We've talked a little bit before about this is the preferred option for everybody. If it doesn't work and there's not something available September 1st, then there are some state preemption options that will be considered and are being talked about right now as a sort of backup plan.
Chair.
Councilman Bonables.
Okay, so the rules, so HB 440 kind of forces cities to, to present an option for an overflow shelter, right?
Yes.
So that's, I understand that. Then any city can submit like a site, like you said. So 9 cities have proposed sites. Have Salt Lake City proposed one site?
We are in discussions with them and participating in that process, yes.
Okay. And then that group will decide somewhere in August, right? Or in August, and then September, it
Yeah,
will be submitted to Mr. Niederhauser and his group to decide which ones will work.
Yeah, it'll be, so there's a physical location which is happening right now, right? Here's a building, for instance. The city says, here's a building in our city. We think it might be an option. There could be some steps to verify that it does meet all the criteria. A lot of details, obviously, in that process with the Coalition to End Homelessness and the cities. My assumption is Wayne Niederhauser has been part of this process from the beginning, so they'll have a pretty good sense prior to September about if a plan seems viable or if there are some options, because they also have to work through all of that sort of preemption piece in case it's needed in September, because they can't wait necessarily till September 2nd and then decide, all right, we have to fix the preemption concept and then get things running at that point, because we could be into, say, February at that, right? It takes a while to get things running. So a lot of the things may happen concurrently during the process, but Wayne Niederhauser is sort of leading that end of things.
Okay. And then I don't remember if this was part of the conversations, this idea of if a city would choose and would work their site, then they would be prevent, they won't have to do it for 4 years. Did that part of the law pass with HB 440?
So this process in front of you right now is that voluntary city process.
Okay.
If the state moves to do a preemption process, that backup sort of plan, then the statute does read that if a city is tasked with taking it on against their will, so to speak, then they are allowed to not have it for 3 more years after that.
Okay, all right.
But that's only a backup plan.
If it's in the backup plan.
Any city can voluntarily just say, yes, we'll do it consistently or more often if they want to.
All right. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I don't see any other questions. And it's looking nice that we have actually 9 possible locations at this time. That's 9 more than we had last year at this time.
I would agree. I'd say at least 9 cities. There could be multiple locations in cities as well. So that is a very positive sign and different than previous years.
Yeah, that's hopeful. So I look forward to the summertime and then getting with the COG on that one. So appreciate that very much. No further questions for the administration. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And council will be moving on to item number 2, the fiscal year 2022 to 23 budget of the police department. And we have Ben and Chief Brown at the table.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The police department budget is in 3 different places in the budget book. The key changes start on page 40. The overview is on page 197, and the staffing document is 270. The total proposed police department budget is nearly $104 million. This is a $20 million increase over last year. That would be 25% if you want to look at it that way. The increased funding covers compensation adjustments and a net increase of 30 FTEs. 21 of those new employees would be civilians. One of them would be a lieutenant. The other 11, you may remember from a couple months ago when the council approved a new sergeant supervisor for the Special Victims Unit and 11 sworn officer positions to create the Violent Crimes Unit. These changes bring the department's total staffing to 750 FTEs. The new civilian FTEs do include a pilot program for creating a civilian responder unit. This is one of the recommendations from the council's operational audit of the police department. There's also a new civilian outreach and recruiting coordinator to help the department reach full staffing faster. There is a corresponding new position in HR. So there's one in HR, one in PD, both dedicated to recruitment and outreach for staffing in the police department. And this was one of the recommendations from the Racial Equity and Policing Commission. The proposed budget would also carry forward into next fiscal year a remaining balance of $2.6 million from the holding accounts the council created in the last few years to implement the recommendations from the audit, the REP Commission, and the public. So that is one-time money, but I think it's important to recognize it's still there for implementing future recommendations. I also want to point out attachment 5. This is the department's status updates on the 46 individual recommendations from the operational audit. So you can go through each of the individual recommendations and see the current status. It's a mix of recommendations that are already completed, are in process, are proposed in the annual budget, and some that have not yet started. If there's any questions on those, we can certainly get more information, or the chief might know off the top of his head. That's it from me for the introduction. I'll turn it over to the chief. He has a presentation with details on the additional positions and the other changes in the budget.
Thank you, Ben. Council, it's good to see most of you again for the second time today. I have with me Shelley Dietrich. She's the finance director for the police department. Good evening, council members and Mayor Mendenhall. I am honored to be here to discuss with you our fiscal 23 budget proposal. A lot has changed in our city, even since last year. Today, our skyline is dotted with more construction cranes than I can ever remember in my 31-year career here in Salt Lake City. Our city is thriving. Our police department is at the center of our city's growth. Just recently, a new study put Salt Lake City as one of the best places to start a career. As our city grows, I want to reiterate the commitment of the women and men of the Salt Lake City Police Department. They are mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, coaches, mentors, advocates. They are committed to their job and our community. I am proud of our nearly 700 employees. 2022 is different than 2020 and vastly more different than 2010. Our community is different. The expectations of policing are different. The population size in our city is growing. Our community wants us to police differently in 2022 and beyond. As such, we need a budget that reflects that. Exactly, more training, more less lethal tools, more technology advances, and more ways to divert non-criminal or low-level calls for service. We need more employees, such as our own victim advocates and civilian telephonic responders. We need more employees to enable our officers to be in the community they serve. We need a budget for fiscal year 2023 that allows for policing to meet the current needs of the community. I am here tonight to ask you for your support. Next slide. As the council is aware, the Salt Lake City Police Department participated in the city's program-based budget. This allows for even greater accountability and transparency in the disbursement of taxpayer dollars. When the police department was asked to participate in the PBB, is what we call it, it was like, oh, I don't know about that. Something new and scary. But I'll tell you what, it was a good thing. We recognized the opportunity and accepted the challenge. We met with the captains and received input on what programs in the department, what they looked like, where the needs were in those programs, and how budget and staffing could improve those programs. The insights that were created were collaborative within the department. Next slide. It also allowed us to look at the needs of our department and to prioritize zeroing in on specific programs instead of budget line items so that we can have a better framework to do our core job of responding to crime while also investing in targeted programs to better serve our community. What we confirmed through the program-based budget process was that a lot of the existing programs that provided diversified civilian response needed additional support to remain functional or to provide additional services that are essential to our community. In total, the Salt Lake City Police Department is requesting a fiscal year budget of just under $104 million. This accounts for critical needs and programs that the department plans to implement to further our abilities of providing the best services to our community. I will go over some of our key budget items focused on civilian response, diversity, and the tools that will improve community service. We are a personnel-intensive department within the city. There are currently 656 total employees within the Salt Lake City Police Department. Of those, 547, 10 of which are partially funded on a COPS hiring grant, are sworn officers. As such, our biggest expense items in our budget are associated with employee salaries. Next slide. Now, I'd like to start off by talking about our civilian response team. The most recent average response time for a Priority 1 call for service was 11 minutes and 58 seconds in April of 2022. This is a slight increase of 13 seconds from April of 2021, with an additional 4,000 calls for service this year to date. That is not unexpected. As we get deeper into spring and summer, we have historically seen call response times increase. We as a police department are continuing to explore ways to divert certain calls for service and to allow officers to respond faster to in-progress emergency calls. As of May 8th of 2022, we have received 45,371 calls for service. That's year to date. During the same period of 2021, we received 41,484. That's a 9% increase. With our civilian response team, the intent is to augment and enhance the current police response service within the city through diversity in response teams, similar to the current co-responder model with our social workers. Next slide. We are building this program from the ground up, which requires a robust project management plan. Our request of just over $130,000 is for an additional full-time sworn employee who will have oversight of the civilian response specialist team. This request is pending in the department's fiscal year 23 budget request. Once approved, the department will start the recruitment process for the professional staff who will comprise the civilian response team. Once staffed, there will need to be a significant strategic, logistical, and tactical support. Similar models across the country have shown great results to help divert those non-hazard, low-level calls for service from going out into the field. Also, to divert additional calls for response from the field, in October of 2021, we launched a program expanding our ability to take and process telephonic calls for service. This was necessary due to the low staffing levels we are experiencing. We are using overtime for this program, utilizing attrition savings as a funding source. In that time, we have handled just over 7,500 calls for service by phone. Now, some of those calls may end back up into patrol, but that's to be expected. Without this program, though, most, if not all, of those calls for service would have to have been dispatched to patrol officers out in the field, and thereby keeping keeping them held down on calls and unable to be proactively patrolling or available for high priority calls or emergency in progress calls. Next slide. When we talk about non-hazard, low-level calls for service that our civilian response team will be primarily responsible for, they include car break-ins with no suspect on site, damaged property, theft, threats, burglaries with no suspect on site, drug problems, suspicious persons or vehicles calls, and unwanted people. In the past, these types of calls have been handled by officers responding in person, but are now handled telephonically unless they need to be present to the field. Our intent is to expand this program with non-sworn officers who will be trained on the proper way to process these types of reports. We will also ensure these civilians are in contact with patrol supervisors so that when there is a call that needs to go to the field, it gets routed properly and quickly. Next slide. Our victim advocates provide a crucial service to our community. Having victim advocates able to provide in-the-field trauma-informed care is incredibly important. In 2021, our victim advocates provided victim services to more than 2,300 victims of violent crimes. Many of these people had more than one case. Our advocates also answered more than 1,000 unique, non-system-based partner calls to their hotline. Most recently, one of our victim advocates responded to a fatal crash in downtown to help support a person during a time of unimaginable stress and trauma. Next slide. As part of this budget, we are requesting to add a victim advocate to our Special Victims Unit. Currently, this position is grant funded, and that funding ends in August. The Special Victims Unit is responsible for all crimes against children, the elderly, as well as any sex-related crime. To be a victim of a sexual assault, no matter what age, is a traumatic and life-changing event, and our survivors need all the assistance we can provide them. Next slide. We are also asking for just over $332,000 to restructure our Victim Advocate Program to create an effective management structure and an advocate career ladder. As you can see on this slide, we will create 2 new positions, the first being a program director and a volunteer coordinator. We will also reclassify 2 positions and make them senior victim advocates. Next slide. With these proposed changes, we will also need to support the program with an annual budget. This will be a budget of just over $42,000. The money will go towards program expenses as referred on the screen. Next slide. Council, this slide shows a snapshot of the great work of our victim advocates. In particular, with this slide, I want to highlight the 1,200 individual safety plans that our team helped develop. We also continue to expand this program. We want to ensure that we are serving all of the communities and that we are doing it in a culturally specific ways. We are continuing to work with the city to increase the accessibility to services for people in our community who do not speak English as their first language. Next slide. As we work with our communities to improve services and build new and stronger relationships, we want to be focused on the promising youth within our community. Our Promising Youth Project is a comprehensive crime, violence, and gang reduction program. The program works with collaborating government agencies and community groups in Salt Lake City. The purpose is to provide promising youth with the opportunities to support they need to unlock their promising potential. Next slide. For fiscal year 23, we are requesting funding for 4 full-time youth specialists. 3 of these positions are currently grant funded, with funding expiring this July. Next slide. These youth specialists will be critical in developing and supporting our annual Promising Youth Summer Opportunity Program. This is an adventure, life skills, and leadership program for children and gives them and our officers and youth outreach specialists the chance to forge and maintain durable and meaningful relationships so we can continue to promote safe and healthy communities. Our ask for the continuation of this program is $15,000. Next slide. On this slide, you can see the achievements of this great program. I would like to highlight the home visits. Our team made more than 700 home visits. This is where our team conducts welfare checks and responds to youth in crisis. This is very important because oftentimes our youth specialists and the officers who help them are often the only consistency in their lives of many of the promising youth we work with. Another highlight I'd like to focus on is the 153 youth who we have helped get enrolled into extracurricular activities. This allowed for these promising youth to have structured-based programming and activities that kept them engaged, accountable, and provided them with areas of growth so they weren't at home or on the streets bored or worse, getting into trouble. This project was also supported by the CRIP. Next slide. Community outreach supports the foundation of every police department in the United States. To be a leader in this field, our department recently invested in a sworn police officer to assume the role of community outreach officer. This person will be able to move our department's goals forward and will be able to communicate with community members and stakeholders, ensuring the community's expectations of the department are met and that our own community outreach and needs are met and grown. As part of our fiscal year 2023 budget, we are asking the City Council for $157,000 to serve as that lead outreach officer, who will have an even expanded role as we enter spring and summer. Recognizing the importance of this role, we have the support and endorsement of the Commission on Racial Equity and Policing for this position. With this new position within our department, we also increase our recruitment efforts both locally and regionally. Today, we are down 37 officers. While we still have a ways to go until we are fully staffed, we are making great strides at both recruitment and hiring. We continue to look at our staffing through the data-informed method and not just exclusively based on perceptions from the street. As we do, we know our department and our city will need to carefully evaluate its sworn staffing numbers in the near future. In the meantime, we're excited to welcome 25 new recruits to our latest Basic Academy class that started this Monday. Next slide. And finally, I want to talk about the last two budget asks that include technology updates and the hiring of a grandma coordinator. First, with our technology upgrades, we are asking for just under $49,000 to launch an expanded online reporting system using Versaterm. Case service will be an important tool for our department. Last fiscal year, the council invested in a technology surrounding Axon, and we were deeply appreciative of that investment and have seen it pay off. We are now asking to improve the ability to help divert calls for service that can be handled online to ensure our officers are able to respond to emergency calls for service and to do proactive policing. This service will give the community members the ability to file police reports immediately, around the clock, on qualifying events through voice, text, web, or mobile apps. This means that we are increasing our accessibility to community members needing our fast and immediate services. Furthermore, and likely most importantly, we will be able to offer this service in a variety of languages. This program will also reduce the need for people to rely on calls to Salt Lake City 911 for tech support. What's critical to this program is that it's fully integrated into our records management system to provide faster policing services. Next slide. We are also seeking $200,000 to move to a cloud-based storage for our records. This is important for us as we move the Valley onto Versaterm and to ensure the continuity of our department as well as fire and dispatch. Our final request in the technology space is to update our ticketing reporting writing system. This new e-ticketing software will have a one-time cost of $60,000. Next slide. And finally, as the council and the mayor is aware, we continue to see an increase in the number of complexity of grandma requests coming through the department. Currently, we have only one grandma coordinator. It's imperative that we start building a team of experts within this field to help support the community and to meet the state mandated deadlines when it comes to public record requests. Next slide. As such, we're requesting a full-time employee for caseload management on grandma-related issues. This position will address the increasing workload and allow us for a succession planning and to increase knowledge and redundancies. Next slide. Council and Mayor, I deeply appreciate your time. As I mentioned a little bit ago, 2022 is different. We need a budget that reflects that, a budget that meets the needs of our department and that gives us the ability to serve our community in a manner they expect. There is so much work ahead of us this summer, and I know our officers will be extraordinarily busy. I know we will continue to see our calls for service increase, and we will continue to see the seasonal increase in violent crimes. There is an urgency right now to do everything we can to expand our programs and the ability to divert calls for service and to add more resources to our department so we can meet the expectations of our community. I appreciate your support and your investment into our department, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Any questions for the Chief at this time? Go ahead, Councilman Petro.
Thank you, Chief. Can I ask about the SVU Advocate? I know this is a service that's provided by some local nonprofits as well, notably the Rape Recovery Center tries to. Is there a deficit in their services? Is there a reason why bringing this in-house would be more beneficial?
Council member, we've always had them in-house. Many of them have been grant funded, and grants are running out or they're being reduced. We feel it's so important for the work that we do and to the victims of, sexual assaults that we want them to be part of our team, to respond 24/7 with us when needed, and so that's why we're asking for
So
it.
it's something we actually do already. It's just transitioning from
Yeah.
grant to.
Right.
And then the second thing on the Promising Youth program, is this actually one of those programs that does pipeline development for future officers, or is this something where we're just doing generalized youth development and trust building with communities where there's low trust?
This is the youth program. It's not the Explore program. It is based in the schools where we have our FTOs, our school resource officers. They work hand in glove with these specialists. They identify, at-risk youth that need help and support, and then we transition to that summer program. It's been a program that we've been fostering and building for several years, and it's really paid off. But yeah, we'd love to have. It's never been supported though in budget, and that's what we're asking for.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Fowler.
I have follow-up questions on those exact two programs, but so I understand that we do the victim advocates in-house, but we also, how do we, are we, well, let me rephrase this. Are they different than the victim advocates that we fund through the DA's office as well?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then with this Promising Youth program, I know that it is grant funded. Did we start this program because we saw that there was a grant and said, ooh, we should get on this and have this opportunity to start a program like this?
You want to start, Shelley?
So this program came in play in part because of a contract we have with the school district. So we have some victim advocates that are funded through the school district, and some we got a partner grant to fund the rest. So we have eight part-time advocates or specialists that are across 36 schools. So the grant is funding 3 of those, and we're losing that funding. So seeing the popularity of the program and the success it's had in the school districts, we feel like it's very necessary to continue this program as part of that outreach that we do there.
Okay. And then this sort of falls in line with my next sort of line of questioning, but in budget amendment number 6, I sort of talked about, and Chief, you and I had a conversation about this, that one of the things that continues to concern me in some ways is that we get very excited about this grant funding, but then we realize the grant funding eventually is going to go away, and this is a responsibility that's now going to fall to the general fund. And I kind of pushed back on budget amendment number 6 with the COPS grant there. Now we're seeing this here in fruition with programs that we get grant funded for, and everybody loves the program, and then now it's the responsibility of the general fund, which, fine, may or may be what we want to do. My question here, or my comment, I guess, is that, and I recognize you probably have a lot on your plate to do this, but I would be interested in the future that when we have these grants and we're looking for this, then the question would be sort of what is it going to take to continue fulfilling this responsibility after the grant ends? And sometimes we get that information, but I'm not sure, unless one of us flags it, do we always get that information? I think it's important and this isn't just for your department, but I do think because of different federal funds, you have more access to federal grant money in some areas than some of our other departments. So to have, when we talk about a grant, to then have the knowledge that in 3 years, 4 years, we're really going to have to look at what that budget looks like, and or be honest about whether or not this is a program or this is something that we want to keep going.
Yeah.
And so the metric looking at metrics and reporting, and is this something that we want to keep going? Is this a program that maybe is a great program, but we can transition to, we have 3 other different youth programs going on in the city, and maybe there's a way to stop reinventing the wheel when we don't have the money for it, but combine these things. And I'm not saying yes or no to this right now, just that this is something I brought up in budget amendment number 6. It's something that concerns me when we, especially as we're looking at ARPA money and all of these, using one-time funding for ongoing needs, and then coming back to the budget and saying, now we have to do something to balance that. And I think that there are ways within these grants to capitalize on the federal money, because nobody wants to turn away the federal money.
Right.
But also say, what does the future look like, and what are the metrics? If it's a program, what are the metrics? Is there a way to what does this look like when the grant actually ends? And I realize that would put a lot of work on your grants manager or on the finance department or on your department to say, hey, here is the grant and here is our future projection or our ideas about it. But I also think that will be really helpful for when we're in this position right now.
Yeah, no, Councilmember Fowler, those are good suggestions and points. I think it would just be a matter of communicating better and just having those meetings and talking with the right people to know, hey, look, we're in year 1 of this grant. This is what it's looking like, 2, 3, and then where we may be going and what the expectation. I mean, did it work like you say? Was it beneficial to the community? Did it help those that we serve? Shelley, did you want to add in on that?
Yeah, actually, from what we're seeing in the ERP and the program-based budgeting, you would see this in a bigger picture. I know some of the initiatives of having a 3-year outlook, right, in the budget is there. But in program-based budgeting, you would be able to see any offsets, like the grant funding that's supplementing these programs and when they might end. So that would be my comment.
May I add a comment?
I totally get that. And two things. Because our call volume is growing so significantly, and awesome that we're decreasing overall crime in the city at the same time, but thanks to a lot of the research that you all have helped lead, we're working to diversify our response to public safety. So I think at that core, this is a good investment for us, acknowledging the growth we're experiencing and the way we want to diversify our response to public safety needs. But let's work together, and with the data scientist that we talked about last Tuesday that's coming on at the end of this month, to help not just track the fall off of the dollars, which is really predictable, but what kind of metrics will help the council and whatever administration, whether it's mine or the next one, to determine if it's worthwhile to pick that up into the general fund when the time comes. So let's work rather immediately to start figuring out what those metrics can look like, and we can have the opportunity of hopefully the years of this federally funded program to help us decide after that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Fowler, Councilman Pui.
Yeah, I do. Thank you for the presentation. I do have a few questions with the civilian response team. I think there is something. There will be something to learn there for sworn officers too. So I don't want to see this as a one-way type situation where the police officers are sort of teaching the non-sworn officers, the civilians, and how to respond. So obviously, that has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there has to be a two-way situation. I'm sure that when we implement this project, this program, we're going to have a lot of learning. And I want to make sure that our police force learns from them. And I also don't want to see this group of people felt like they are below, that they are inferior to, because they are a key part of what the values of this city and how to answer, calls for safety. So I want to make sure that when we structure this new I don't know what we call it, this new program, that there is a good learning, cross-pollinating. I don't know what the word is,
Yeah.
but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, Councilmember Pui, that's a great, we want the very same. I remember several years ago when the council gave us social workers, and we said, social workers in a police department? I mean, we pioneered that, and it's worked out great. I tell you what, we've learned a lot from social workers. This program, just like you're talking about, Councilmember, these civilian response specialists will be in lineups with officers. This isn't the program that, oh, they're over there. This is the program when they're part of us and we're all working together. We'll learn a lot from them and they'll learn a lot from us, but we're one team as we serve our community.
Okay, thank you. And I want to also make sure that there is a way for the public to see numbers, to see how this program is being implemented and how many calls that are answering to, and hopefully some sort of summary. And that comes back to a point that I brought up earlier in the year. We used to have a very handy map that I used to use a lot, the area map from the Salt Lake City Police Department, and I was told that that contract ran out, and we had issues with that contract, or the police, where you could see any part of the city and it will point out the calls for service and to any given area that you will look into. And I feel like the public deserves to see hot areas. And right now we have a list of calls, but it's very hard to see where are the hot spots. And I believe that we need to figure out a way to re-up that contract or find a different provider, or maybe it's internally done. I mean, the tools are there, Microsoft, and there are other companies that offer those tools.
Yeah. Yeah, no, as the mayor mentioned, the data scientist who starts next week is going to be amazing, and it's going to restructure a lot of the things we do, how we look at them, how our community can use those tools, just like you. So give us a little bit of time, and I think we're going to bring a whole spectrum of tools and visual things that'll help our community see what we're doing.
Okay, I do feel very strongly about seeing this in some sort of map form. And respecting on the youth program, and I love this, and I would like to see, I'm sure that you guys have some sort of annual report, or how is it working, right? And I heard that it's working, and I would love to see this, and I would love to support it, but I would love to see some sort of, how many kids are being in the program, how many kids last year, and what benchmarks are you guys tracking? And I think that would be very useful for me. And just to finish, I see in your budget that you're removing traffic mitigation, the steel plate, the street plate rentals, and all that. And I feel, we both testified on this bill, but the fact that the state was able to pass this bill, Senator Iwamoto, and I still think that the enforcement and the money has to be there, because if we let it go just because we have an enhanced law and there's higher penalties for it, I just don't think that that's going to be enough. So removing the money for the steel plates and the dedicated effort and curbing this, I don't think it's going to be.
I couldn't agree more with you. It was a one-time funded project. But I think we'll look for funding to keep that project going, because as you and we went out and looked at those plates. They work 24/7. But we just need the money to rent them, and then we need the money to when we rent them, the contractor moves them to the different locations. Like when we were out there on the street, we had to have another one put in the middle because they get displaced. But that's a good program, and I would love to see that continue.
Thank you, Councilmember Mono.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First, building off what Councilmember Fowler was saying, I'd be interested in, and it's probably not from the chief, but maybe our staff or the administration, just like a comparison of all the youth programs that we have throughout different departments in the city and what they each do, how they're all different. Because in my mind, those are all probably really great and important, but they're a little bit outside of the typical lane of what a city does. I mean, it's not roads or parks, and I just want to make sure we're keeping track of what all those programs are, what the outcomes are, and if we actually need all of them individually or if we can consolidate and what that might look like. But my question for you, Chief, is on the, I think you called it the civil engagement and recruitment specialist. for the police department. Maybe just paint for me a picture of what the current recruitment person does and why and what duties this additional recruitment person would help with. And I think if you remember some of our conversations in the past, one thing I'm really interested is in making sure that our department can recruit from diverse pools of citizens so that our department starts to match the residents and the community that they're serving. And I think that's important to build trust with communities of color and communities that are maybe traditionally marginalized. And so I'm hoping that there's something in this new job description of this new person where they can be sort of mobilized to recruit from a broader pool of applicants than what we're normally, but let me know what the thoughts are.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what this person does, to go out and into the community, into different events, into job fairs, to be that recruiter, to line up a team of people to go, to represent the diversity of our department and exactly draw upon the diversity of our community and those that we want to serve here on our police department. So it'll be a person that has a full-time job that'll work very close with the recruitment of the HR. And together they'll do exactly what you want and look for the diversity here and to serve our community.
So the additional person just allows us to go to more job fairs and more community events than what we've been doing in the past, or what's
to completely expand what we're doing, to not only, I mean, some job fairs maybe just one person, but some events may take a whole team. We may need to staff something for Pride, and Pride's going to take us 3 days worth of 10 hours, 12 hours a day. So to get people to work, to come down to the event, to go to the job fairs, to take people to the schools, to do all those things, it's a lot of work, and we really want to ramp up our game and do it much better.
Okay, great. I'd be interested in maybe offline or just in a written report, just kind of understanding what additional things we can do with that. So if you can kind of track how many more job fairs or what types of communities that they were able to reach that we hadn't before, that would be helpful. I think that's important, but I just want to make sure that we're using that additional person and that resource in a really targeted way.
I agree. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Wharton, did you have?
Yes. I had a question. One of the questions from the packet, well, two of them actually. One, coordinating the diversion of mental health calls. So with these programs that we're adding, how are we going to have police officers or our 911 dispatchers know which other program to deploy between our CIT, our social workers, the University of Utah's Mobile Crisis Center, the county's program? How do we know how to coordinate between all those to make sure that we're not overlapping and we're being as efficient as we can?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it's the hub of that is going to be in 911, and Director Myers is going to probably lead the charge on that. But as those calls come in, those calls will be triaged to see what would be the best response, whether it be police officers, CIT, MCOT. I mean, some of those calls don't require a police officer. Some will be MCOT. So there's an ungovernable juvenile team out there. So a lot of it will start within 911, and from there, for whatever criteria is explained and whatever help is needed, those services will be dispatched. But it's going to be a continued conversation and talking about what we do, what worked, what didn't work, and how we can collaborate and do much better.
Okay. And then I also want to ask about the civilian responder pilot program that we had additionally put $2 million aside for that. I'm just wondering if we can, what's an update on that, and what kind of calls are we looking at for that program?
The calls would be those low-level calls that I mentioned, burglary reports where the suspect's not on site, threats, things like that they could respond on.
Okay.
But
and the timeline for development of that?
right now, we'd like to hire that lieutenant as soon as we can to start, because there's a lot of things that need to go. I mean, we have to get policies put together, training put together. We have to start hiring, but we would like to hire in January of next year, and hopefully have these teams functional and on the street by March.
Okay. Because I know that the mayor talked about at the State of Downtown that we're seeing higher numbers for calls and higher demand for calls, but a higher percentage of those calls are for either not for a crime in progress or the sort of the crime's already taken place, the urgency is over. And that, I think, feels consistent with what I'm hearing from a lot of my residents, that it's a lot of like nuisance type calls or things that maybe are associated with being like proximate to criminal activity but aren't exactly criminal, but are nevertheless concerning for them. And I would love to, this is particularly in areas where like near the trailheads or up in the higher avenues, and I want to be able to tell those residents that we have a plan for dealing with those calls, both short term and long term. And I think that we're doing the right thing in developing this program. So what can I tell those residents about what this budget does for them in the meantime?
We are trying to diversify our call response at many levels. If we can do it telephonically, to have either light duty officers or overtime officers take those calls. That takes the pressure off the street. The police civilian response team, the civilians that can come out and take those low-level calls, our social workers that can come out and help. There are so many things we're trying to reduce those calls for service and wait times, and then provide better service to those immediate 911 emergency calls that we really want our officers to be on.
Right. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I just want to say I'm very much in support of all of these alternative response programs. I absolutely want to continue going forward with all of them, and I know that we're sort of building this race car as we're driving it.
Yeah.
But I also, want to be able to tell residents what our short-term plan is to meet the existing needs, while we're working out all of the specifics and these other programs that we're working on.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councilmember Valdemars.
Thank you, Chief. I also agree with Councilmember Wharton on the alternative responses, and I think the public will be able to tell us, if it works or not, because it's so new and how we are approaching the different issues that we need to deal with in our city. So I'm looking forward to launch that and see what's the outcome of it. I'm in support of that. Also, obviously, budget season is hard for council members, at least for me, because we're kind of in the middle. We want a lot of programs and services for our community and for our city, but we're also kind of like the watchers. I don't know if that's the word, the watchdog. Is that the word in English? Of the taxpayers' pockets, really. So it's always, it's hard to balance what, ultimately what the most important thing that a constituent would want in exchange of them paying taxes, right? So anyway, through all the departments, I've been thinking, and after the mayor's proposal, like, what else can we adjust here? Can we take a look, a second look at things and see where we can adjust a little bit? And so having that said, for all of the departments, there is just one question about GRAMA right now. I was under the understanding that we already do GRAMA through CINDIS, through the recorder's office. So this will be in addition, just like one new person for your department to do GRAMA requests?
No, we have a GRAMA coordinator.
You already have one?
It's in our department.
Okay, and you want a second one?
A second one to help.
Okay.
The workload is so great and the number of requests, and now everybody's GRAMA requesting video, body-worn camera, and the time it takes to go through and redact images and things like that, that takes a lot of work. I would say the police department probably has more GRAMA requests than most of the city put together.
Okay.
So that's where we'd love to have the help.
Okay. It was just a confusion about, okay, so there's a line item, seems to be, a good chunk if we were already doing that. Anyway, I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Puy.
I would like to, reiterate something that Councilmember Wharton said about coordinating, these mental health calls, and that's something that I'm very interested because all of these agencies and departments are doing this right now, and we need to have some sort of coordination there. But I also would like to find out a little more. One of the staff questions I feel very strongly about is question number 6 about crisis intervention training and what it will take to make sure that all the officers earn this and maintain it, and how much will it cost. So I would like to, leave that question to you, and hopefully we can get that answer because, we are growing. We're a city that are growing. We are putting a lot of effort on keeping our citizens safe, but also we need to make sure that this doesn't slip again, right? And that our officers are trained on the escalation and all of these issues. So we want to make sure that we don't make a mistake.
No,
the training is very important.
Yeah, I agree. I believe that in the report, the answer was we had 472 officers that are certified. We have 43 that aren't. In talking with the coordinator of CIT, he said a lot of those are laterals that have certifications. They just haven't brought them to us. So we will do one of two things. We'll either make sure we get those certifications, or we have 3 more academies, CIT academies scheduled this year, I think July, August, and October. Yeah, so 3 more. And it'll just be a matter of getting those officers, if they don't have the certification in those classes, to be certified. So.
Clarification, if I heard the question right, you're interested about officers maintaining their CIT certification, not just going through it once initially.
Both, so making sure that everybody is certified, either through finding their certification and making sure they get certified, hopefully this year, or and also recertifying and making sure that everybody maintains this certification.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Petro.
Not to beat a dead horse, but just because, you got to give everyone a chance to talk. Going back to the grants topic, is it, so for nonprofits, it's standard for us to establish programs and then to apply for grants that would sustain them. Is that something that's not common here, or is there a process whereby we know that this is going to expire in 18 months and we prospect grants to sustain it instead of the transfer to the general fund that seems normal?
Billy, do you know?
Jordan, would you mind? So some of the programs are pilot. Some of the grants like OVC are longer term. I'll let Jordan speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so really we apply for grants in 2 forms. So formula grants, and we receive those both from the state and from Department of Justice, and then competitive grants. And so really with these competitive solicitations, specifically the one that's funding the Promising Youth Program, those are intended to be one-time grants. So we do try to focus a lot of the program development into the formula applications, but occasionally an opportunity comes up in a competitive solicitation, and we've done our best to continue those. One example is the HOST program. I don't know if you remember the Homeless Outreach Services team. We did 4 grant cycles of competitive funding to keep that going, and it eventually evolved into the social work program. So
thank you for
if
that
helps.
clarification. Thank you.
One last question.
Yeah, I have some questions, so go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Last question. So another thing that I was looking here in some of our questions is the response time that kind of has gone up a little bit, and one of the reasons is we don't have enough officers. That's why it's taking a bit longer, because we have more calls coming in. How often, Chief, do you guys look at how you're responding if there's any deficiencies here and there? And I'll tell you why. It's when I drive around town, sometimes I've seen that there's a lot of officers maybe taking care of something that it doesn't seem to be very dangerous, right? It might be somebody that is disruptive, maybe, is whatever it is. But it seems like we deploy a lot of cars, a lot of officers sometimes, and it looks excessive, but I'm not expert, so I'm not sure. But I have seen it myself and have heard from constituents as well. And so, it's not just the constituents saying, hey, what's happening? I've seen it myself. And so I would like to know a little bit about that, and, what are you guys doing to?
Well, we're always looking for ways to improve our efficiencies,
Right.
staffing, when we staff, the time of days, the days of the week. So that's always, something we're looking at when we staff patrol in different divisions in the department. But I think a lot of when this data scientist comes on board, when we start to look at the bigger picture, where we need to be and at what times of the day to have the most impact on crime, I think that'll be helpful as well. So, and then it comes down to management, making sure that we have sergeants and lieutenants and field commanders out there, making sure that people are doing the job we expect of them. But I would hate to just say that, if you see 2 or 3 cars at any stop, that they're not needed there. Sometimes it does take a lot of resources to handle some of these calls.
Right.
Yeah.
But but as a side comment, I've seen more than 3 cars, sometimes tending,
Yeah.
or so that's why when I wonder, what's happening, what the call was about, that we needed
Yeah.
that many cars. Anyway, just a side comment. Thank you.
Just following up on what Councilmember Valdemoros asked, maybe you can give us some more information about this offline, but there are cases where it's reported in the news or somebody videotapes it or that type of thing where an incident occurs and you might have 7 cars show up. And then the incident is under control, and some of the cars arrived after the incident became under control. And we don't understand why those officers that arrived after stay for the whole incident wrap-up. So that's what is confusing to the public, I think, is when you see a lot of cars and some get there after everything's under control, but they stay maybe for an hour or more. That's confusing to us. And also, when you know what the incident was, so for example, and I think it was right out here where there was a young woman who had allegedly stolen a car. And it just so happened that however it was reported, a lot of officers responded. And the officers stayed there all of the time. So the question that our office was asked is, why would that be? And is that a good use of resources? And we said, we don't know.
Yeah.
So if there's something you can do to help us understand that, is there some reason officers can't be released if they weren't involved or that type of a thing?
Not
right now
yeah,
necessarily, just sometime.
I'd have to look at it case by case and know the specifics, but we can look at those things for you as well.
We have about 3 examples that people have brought to us that, of course, we don't know what to do with. We say, well, we'll
Yeah.
forward that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Chief. I have a couple questions, but I think most of the council members here already kind of raised a lot of my questions. But, we have a very large request for an increase, 20%. And so the public safety is on every resident's mind. They all want it, but they also want it at a less cost, of course, right? That's what we all do, right?
Yeah.
And we all appreciate the services we have. And I sometimes think, our calls to services are going up, but I also think that may be a good thing. That means people are actually calling to the police office services because they need it, and they also think that they can get good help from it. If they didn't think there was a place to get help, they'd be calling their neighbors, but they're calling the one number that they know they can get help from. And so I think that actually is one way is it's a positive metric, is that, hey, people are looking for you to help them and they know that they can get that help. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the diversification, because that is also necessary across the board to reduce the stress off of a police officer on something that he doesn't really need. He's not probably trained all that well for, social side of the house or the mental side of the house, or that's something that he doesn't need to be responded to.
Yeah.
I don't need the Navy to come in to do something when I have the Coast Guard or the police to do that. But we also need to be very careful of our budget and how well we spend it. Case in point of those things. And I understand that also from prior work. Sometimes you need your training. You're doing a bunch of things. That's why it looks like you have a lot of people staying around.
Yeah.
But with that said, we also need to be wary of just growth. And so when we look at the metrics, I'm always thinking that maybe the overtime and other usage of the police officers would come down because of the diversified model. So I just want to make sure that we have a good metric in studying how well these programs are working, and are they actually doing their intention, which is to reduce the stress level over here.
Mm-hmm.
If this stress level over here and these hours are not going down, then is this really helping us out?
Yeah.
And I hope that we do that in the future, because we've had small increases in police, but we have also realized that we had a deficit. Now we're building out of our hole. I think retention is stabilized. On the officers programs, I mean, we're not losing as many officers as we did for a couple of years there.
Yeah.
And our hiring is going up. So how do we make sure we're spending our money wisely, and that we also are making sure that we are keeping the thumbs on our lieutenants and others and our supervisors that, hey, we don't need everybody standing around here, because the cost is still should be on everyone's mind. So
I agree. I mean, if there's one thing we do in the police department, we keep a lot of stats.
Right.
If we can't measure it, we can't manage it. And so, like I say, with the addition of this data scientist and some of the work we're doing, I think we can confidently come back to you and show you the metrics of these programs and these staff requests that we're asking for.
Great. And so one of the, maybe I didn't even ask this one, but just kind of talked around it. But out of the service calls, how many do we expect to go through to the civilian response team and the low priority? How many of those are low priorities that we think that the civilian response team would be taking off the plate of an officer or another 911 call? I'm not asking for the answer now. I'm just thinking that. So that should reduce our overtime thoughts.
Yeah, and response times and the whole thing. Yep,
right.
Absolutely. I think Matrix in their study actually had calculated the number of hours, and I don't remember it right off the top of my head, but they had a kind of a number of hours. Ben, do you have that?
Yeah, they estimated it would take about 20 FTEs to respond to the 14,000 calls that were identified as not needing a police officer response. There are some differences between the call types that the department is proposing for the program and what Matrix proposed, but there's room to grow is what's expected.
Okay, thank you very much. See no further questions. Thank you very much for your time and energy.
Thank you, Council.
All right. Thanks, Ben. All right, Council, we're moving on to item number 3, which is the fiscal year 2022 to 23 budget. And we have the Community and Neighborhood Department, the CAN department. We have Allison here with the staff. Blake is here. I see Blake, and I saw Tammy also. And I always have to call you Orion, but I know it's Orion, but I flew the Orion. It's all yours, Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to orient all of you briefly, not Orion, orient.
Oh, I've been called worse.
So the mayor's recommended budget pages for the Community and Neighborhoods Department are, the key changes are on page 37. The department overview is on pages 153 to 158, and their staffing document begins on 259. And to further help you reorient yourselves after the previous briefing, Community and Neighborhoods has 6 departments: transportation, housing stability, building services, planning, youth and family, and the office of the director. And I think nearly all of them are here today, the division heads. The proposed general fund budget for CAN, the Community and Neighborhoods Department, is $38.3 million. This is nearly $9 million higher than FY22, or about 31% more. Each of the divisions in the department would grow in the mayor's recommended budget, but transportation division funding is by far the greatest increase at about $5 million, or a 62% increase over FY22. part of that explanation, if you look on the chart on the second page of the staff report, you can see that in FY22, transportation was actually lower than usual. So there was sort of a dip in it in FY22, but if we compare the FY23 proposed numbers to the FY21 actuals, the increase in transportation funding would only be about 10%. The budgets of 3 of the 6 other divisions would also grow substantially for a variety of reasons that I'm sure you can ask more information from the experts about. Those 3 are Housing Stability, Office of the Director, and Building Services. And the number of FTEs would grow by 9 to a total of 188. And then just finally some clarifications. The department was good enough to provide some clarifications on the staff report, things I maybe have mischaracterized or that they could improve. So I've included those in an update of the staff report. This came after the first staff report was published, so there may be a little additional information. If you hear something that doesn't jibe with your memory, there may be a little information in the staff report. Or you can just ask me about it, of course. So I'll hand it over to Blake and his team.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Department of Community and Neighborhoods proposed budget for FY22 to FY23. And if we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, great. I'd like to briefly discuss the department's operating ethos, a few accomplishments from the last year, and then I'll turn the time over to Orion Goff, the Deputy Director of Development Services, to discuss the Building Services, Planning, and Transportation Division requests. After that, Tammy Hunsaker, the Deputy Director of Community Services, will then close our presentation with the Housing Stability, Real Estate Services, and Youth and Family Division requests. Okay. Last year, on the heels of the excitement about our new city flag, I announced the department's focus on SAGO, sustainability, equity, growth, and opportunity, as you can see in the image on the slide. Guided by these principles, CAN's goals are to increase upward mobility, housing choice, community investment, and transportation options. We also seek to create a 15-minute city and foster safe and healthy built environments through everything we do. Focusing on these goals and using the SAGO principles, we hope to create a city that is beautiful, that is resilient in the face of challenges, that is attractive to the creativity and capacity of the human spirit, and that is an equitable, life-sustaining home to all residents. Next slide, please. If there's one takeaway I hope you remember from today's presentation, it's the undisputable fact that we're experiencing the opportunity of growth, construction, and investment in our city. CAN is on the front lines, and the work we do and the policy direction you provide is what sets our city apart from others as a world-class city, in my humble opinion. To start, thank you for your ongoing support, including the funding of a second department deputy director, the 4 new planners, which I think Nick and Michaela would say has vastly improved the mental health and morale of their team, and our gentrification and anti-displacement study known as Thriving in Place. I just wanted to start by saying thank you for that support last year, and it is much appreciated. As many of you are aware, last year the Building Services Division processed 11,969 permits with a total construction valuation of $2.4 billion. That is more than a $1 billion increase over the prior year. The Planning Division entitled 6,251 housing units last year, which is 3,000 more units than the year before, which I believe was a record the year before and the year before. Our Transportation Division is currently managing more than 60 projects, and to their credit, they typically bring in $5 to $10 million each year in grant funding to fund the gap needed for many of the infrastructure elements a world-class city needs, including protected bike lanes, expansion of the transit system, green bike expansion, urban trails, area studies, and first last mile connections. Lastly, our Youth and Family Division expanded programming on the west side with a Family Learning Center and Youth City programming in the Fair Park neighborhood that provided critical services to 25 children and will grow to 40 this summer. I want to say thank you to the CAN leadership team sitting behind me that worked an inordinate number of hours and navigated a global pandemic to deliver services to those most in need in our city. Next slide, please. I channeled into my scrapbook sensibilities, and this last slide aims to show the human and qualitative side behind the quantitative information I provided on the previous slide. Since starting at the city just under 2 years ago, it has been a priority of mine to create a workplace culture of professionalism, hard work, and fun. The photos on the slide capture our regular Friday lunch hour service at the homeless resource centers, a rather spooky cemetery tour during the Halloween season with a local historian, and the 3 books our department leadership has read in the last 2 years. The first, City on the Line, was a book focused on priority-based budgeting. How to Kill a City was an examination of gentrification and displacement case studies across the nation. And Fixer Upper, which we're currently reading, is about the nation's inadequate housing policies and what we can do about it at the local level. So please consider this my formal invitation to all of you to join us as we typically break the reading into thirds with guided discussions, and if we're lucky, we get a visit from the author. Now I'll turn it over to Orion Goff to dive into the details of the budget requests that we have put much thought into, and we appreciate your consideration. And next slide, please.
Thank you for your time, council members, and Orion is just fine. Angela's been calling me OG lately, so I might have picked up a new nickname at this shade of my career. I would like to say I really have enjoyed the change in scenery that I've had working with Blake and Tammy and the rest of the staff from after 17 and a half years in the building services division, and as the building official, it's been a nice change of scenery and a little broadening of activities, right? And so I'm concentrating most of my efforts on the 3 divisions that do many, many touch points with the community, building services, and planning and transportation. We've estimated between those 3 divisions, we have somewhere around 70,000 or more touch points with citizens every year. And that represents a lot of work. And we are looking for some additional resources to address those needs. In 2010, for an example, we did 25,000 inspections on a building valuation of about $400 million. And fast forward to 2020, this rose to over 50,000 building inspections on a valuation of $1.4 billion. And then Blake illustrated what happened last year when we added another $1 billion in valuation to that. So we've done that increase in work, somewhere around 200% increase, with about 30% more staff in those 10 years. And so we're to the point now where we really need to increase our number of inspectors that are working out of building services to compensate for that amount of work, for that workload. So we're requesting 2 full-time employees that would be building inspectors to address that exponential growth that we've seen in workload. And then we're also struggling to keep up with our every 4th year inspection on apartments. We're responsible for about 2,400 inspections on about 2,400 units, apartment units, and we're struggling to keep up with that. And that additional civil enforcement officer that we're requesting would also help with the boarded buildings. We all have discussed the impact of vacant buildings on, other issues within the city, especially our public safety officials, our first responders, and so we'd like to help keep those boarded buildings secure. In the planning division, we wanted to be sure, and I personally wanted to be sure, and thank you for those 4 additional planners that we got last year. That has had a demonstrable effect in the planning division. It's had a really good effect. They don't feel spread so thin, and even though we've had to work really, really hard to keep those positions filled, we appreciate the fact that they're there to do the work. And Blake also brought up, the amount of work that they've done has also doubled, nearly doubled in the last fiscal year as well. So that work group is also very, very busy. We are asking in that group that we're going to have a economic or a development liaison that was mandated by the state legislature in House Bill 433. That liaison is going to specifically be dealing with development in the Northwest Quadrant.
Orion?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, it's just me. Could we get the next slide, please?
Are we on to planning?
Yeah.
Anyway, at any rate, that liaison will be working in the planning division, and they'll be, specifically dedicated to the Inland Port and Northwest Quadrant projects. And it'll be a similar assignment as we have for our building services and economic development liaison that is currently filled by Ryan Barber and was previously filled by Mayara Lima. In Transportation Division, we also wanted to thank you for, next slide, please.
Next, thank you.
Oh, yes, I did miss. In planning, we are also asking for some funding for the historic preservation surveys that are recommended by best practices to be done every 5th year, and we're on about our 10th year for that. Those surveys will be done in the South Temple, Central City, and Avenues districts. So that's the additional funding that we're asking for there. In Transportation Division, we wanted to be sure and thank you for the on-demand funding that we received last year and put that towards livable streets and traffic calming. And this year we're asking for additional staff for livable streets, 2 transit program planners, and we're also asking for funding for frequent transit increase, and that would be for the increased routes for Route 1, 2, 9, and 29. That's a partnership that we have with UTA to provide enhanced transit systems using their vehicles. Also, we're asking for an increase for on-demand service, which has also been very popular to enhance the ability of our constituents to find a way to get around the city. And then last but not least, we're asking for school district bus passes. We're asking to shift $100,000 from the HIVE program to that partnership with between SLC Education Foundation and UTA to enhance that service as well.
Thanks, Orion. And if I could add just a tiny bit more context on the transportation slide, this is a really exciting opportunity to relaunch a traffic calming program that hasn't been a part of the city or funded, I believe, since 2004. I know John could fact check me on that. The 2 FTEs would be the pilot employees for this project, and anecdotally, the number of meetings I have, the amount of emails or calls that John and team receive, it's one of our most frequent constituent complaints is traffic calming related projects, whether that's a dangerous 4-way stop or crosswalk, a hill where drivers often speed and so forth. So the 2 employees would allow a mix of larger scale Capitol Hill neighborhood by neighborhood projects, but also a resource for the council members would be quick action responses on minor projects. So if there was a small project that required bollards or some other type of traffic calming component that, is something below a roundabout or a more capital intensive project, it would give us the ability to get out, we hope, within a 24-hour range to address that. A little bit more on the frequent transit network, that funding, It's my opinion this is funding our future dollars. It's one of the great uses of city resources to create a more equitable city. When we look at the startup funds that are included in this budget for Route 1, that's an east-west connector that can serve as a primary transportation mode for someone living in a West Side neighborhood going to West High School. And if they graduate from West High School and go to the University of Utah, they can continue to use the Route 1 to go from their neighborhood in Rose Park to the University of Utah. So you're able to go from Rose Park to downtown to South Avenues to the University of Utah. We've been working the Transportation Division very tirelessly to upgrade our bus stops along this route. And one item that I'm thrilled to announce is that some of the bus stop improvements on 9th West will include a green bike station, which will be the first of its kind on the west side. And that's a little more context on that one. And then lastly, the on-demand ride services that Orion mentioned. Thank you for those funds. To clarify, it's the same amount of funding that was provided last year. We just had it in disparate places, the way it was broken up. So the amount for the on-demand ride services is the same as was funded last year. I'm happy to report that that program, ridership, since January, has grown 176%. We're seeing a tick each month. One really interesting data point for you all is at the conclusion of Fare Free February, there is an immediate downtick that fortunately is slowly climbing back, but I think it speaks to the importance of no fare transportation. So thank you for that. It looks like Chair Dugan, you might have had a question. If not, I'll pass it to Tammy to continue.
I'll wait till the end, but
Okay.
thank you. But you could just a positive head nod on the Fareless February.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for your support of that.
Thank you, Blake and Orion. Can we go to the next slide? All right. The first division I'm going to talk about is housing stability. And as you know, housing stability administers support programs, among other functions, for housing. And these programs are funded with federal, local, and with Funding Our Future dollars. So some highlights of this year's budget include a request for just under $97,000 for a community commitment program special projects coordinator. This is actually one of the positions we're proposing to move the funding from ARPA to the general fund. This program provides service opportunities that support those experiencing homelessness. So this is the program that does activities such as resource fairs, coordinates kayak court, and navigates housing opportunities for those experiencing homelessness. Another program that we're proposing to fund through Housing Stability's budget is the City Ambassador Program, also referred to sometimes as the Downtown Ambassador Program. We're requesting just under $1.3 million, and this is for the expansion into the ballpark and the Central City neighborhood. This expansion was previously funded with state mitigation grant funds and also non-departmental funds. So we are now shifting for FY23 a request to the general fund. The state mitigation grant funds have been earmarked for other activities. So as you are likely aware, the City Ambassador Program is a community-based public safety resource, and it really looks to comprehensively assist businesses, residents, visitors, and workers in these neighborhoods, and refers people experiencing homelessness to qualified service providers. So it's a very essential program in these neighborhoods. And then this isn't on the slide, but I'd also like to point out within CAN's budget is a portion of the $21 million that the mayor has recommended for affordable and deeply affordable housing, which can create up to 1,000 new units for our residents that we're estimating. So it's 12 million of this 21 million that's within CAN's budget. It will take an amendment to the city's consolidated plan to allocate these funds within CAN's budget, but I just wanted to say that we're looking forward to bringing this discussion to you in greater detail at a future date, and really look forward to working with the council to deploy these funds to address the city's affordable housing crisis. Moving on to real estate services, the next slide. Real estate services is not an official division within CAN, so it sits within the Office of the Director's budget. This group manages the city's vacant properties and also our third-party leases, and also manages permits and leases within the right-of-way. So there are two highlights that we would like to point out within this group, and it's a $500,000 request from the CIP Maintenance Fund for maintenance of vacant city-owned properties. This is a new request, but it really is definitely needed to help address some of the deferred maintenance issues, to repair and stabilize some of the buildings that the city owns and some of the properties. This is especially important with historic properties such as Warm Springs, Fisher Mansion, and the former public safety building. There are some repairs that need to be done to maintain the historic integrity of these buildings while we plan and execute a longer-term strategy for the buildings. Another request through this group is a $300,000 request for a community connection center lease. This is the lease for the facility that the police department is in. It's new for this year that this would be handled within CAN's budget, but the real estate services team has been taking more ownership over these third-party leases. So the $300,000 would be for the lease and related property costs. As you probably know, the CCC Center provides liaisons between frontline police work and the community. So it's an essential service that is provided. And then finally, the next slide is the Youth and Family Division. And as you are likely aware, the Youth and Family Division, they carry out programming ranging from youth after school and summer programs to digital equity, to programming to increase financial security, self-sufficiency, and support the health and well-being of families. So they do a lot on a relatively small budget. Two highlights from their budget, we're requesting just about $94,000 for a new senior community programs manager, and this is for the My Brother's Keeper Salt Lake City program. If you don't know what this program is, it's a program affiliated with the Obama Foundation, and it really acknowledges the disparities that young people of color face. And it works to address those disparities by eliminating barriers and creating pathways of opportunity. So it's youth and family working in coordination with the mayor's office, with the school district, with Voices for Utah Children, University Neighborhood Partners, and NeighborWorks Salt Lake City, and the United Way as well. So it's a coordinated effort within the community. The last highlight I would like to point out with youth and family is a community and program manager request. This is just under $93,000, and this is another one of those FTE shifts from ARPA to the general fund. And this is really needed within youth and family to support the expansion of services and programming that they have recently carried out. And I would just like to give a shout out to the whole entire Youth City team for really doing a great job, being responsible and adaptable, providing direct services throughout the pandemic. They've done a great job with limited resources. So these are all of the highlights within CAN's budget. I would just like to thank the council for your consideration and also thank Allison for her great work doing the analysis.
Thank you very much, Blake, Orion, and Tammy. Any questions? Councilman Wharton.
Thank you. Has moving Fix the Bricks into CAN reduce the backlog at all?
Go ahead.
Tony is better able to speak to the details, but I do know that it was recently moved and they are working through the transition of moving it, trying to streamline some processes. So they are hoping to reduce the backlog. Since it was such a recent move, I don't believe the backlog has been reduced yet, but do expect progress over the next few months.
Okay, and then there is a question in the report too about the HEART team and whether that's resulted in measurable improvements to neighborhood safety. And I would expand the question a little bit. The question was about, if there's anything that we could learn for the next budget, I think, but is there anything from that we can learn that would inform our discussions about while we have this pause in place on new shelters?
Speaking to measurable metrics, I know Tony's team does measure a lot of metrics, and they've created really fancy dashboards. I don't know if there are any specific measurable. Are there, Tony? With the HEART team? Is this something we should come back with information at a future date? We can put together information and email it to the council.
Okay, great. And then, sorry, I only have 2 more, but they'll hopefully be fast. Do we know how much money or how much of the budget will be used in transportation for livable streets and traffic calming in this year?
So right now, what's on the proposal is for the staffing, which is 2 transit program planners fully loaded. Those 2 positions are just over $200,000. There is not a capital ask. If we didn't get project capital, we would work on CIP backlog. However, what I will say is that we have put in a request with CIP funding, and also have our fingers crossed that a portion of the $10 million in the last budget amendment that's in a holding account could be dedicated as a capital infusion if those 2 positions are funded.
Okay.
We're hoping on that, a portion of that 10 million, and then also CIP recommendations that'll be before you in the near future.
Okay. And then my last question is for our youth and family program. So I see that we're kind of expanding the scope, and which I think is a good thing. But are we seeing like increased enrollment or participation of youth? How much has participation in Youth City risen in the last year, for example?
We do have Kim here. I can speak to the fact that there's more demand than we have capacity for at the moment, but if you want, we could add that to a written response to give you those exact enrollment numbers.
Okay, yeah, and even just kind of fleshing out what you said, that there's increased demand, like, is it that we have the same number of kids but they're wanting to do different things, or that we have more kids that are wanting to do existing things, or both, or whatever?
My understanding would be that there are more children within the city that would like to utilize the resource, or I guess more parents, more families with children that want to utilize the resource than we have the programming or capacity for. I'll double check with Kim on the specifics of that. So I don't want to tie that exactly to like a population growth or whatnot, but just the fact that within the city is more desire for that programming than we have the capacity for at the moment.
Okay. And then when you answer the transportation question too, could you talk a little bit about when if we're adding, when we initially did, I don't know if it was the last year or the year before, a big investment in transportation just to look at neighborhood calming issues. And I think we funded an FTE for that. And so this budget has livable streets that would take on 2 additional employees. But if we aren't adding any capital, what are they going to be able to do? Mm-hmm. So if you're going to do a supplemental response on that, if you could address that.
Yeah, and part of the previous funding helped pay for the large study that we just completed citywide that identified the neighborhood by neighborhood needs. And so in our responses, we can delineate that existing position versus the 2 new and those distinctions. We would be happy to do that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Petro.
Thank you. So I'm not sure I heard the on-demand service. It's actually going to stay the same because we're maintaining levels?
Yeah, so we had two different accounts that we pulled money from last year. One was an isolated $800,000, and then the other was 1.1 million in funding our future. So this year it's just bringing it all together in funding our future. So the funding level is the same as last year, but we're consolidating it.
So there's no hope for a geographical increase. From what I understand, this is the only hope for us to have public transit out to the new prison for either employees or for families of people who are incarcerated. And I really believe that should be a priority. I know there was an issue with the airport and them not wanting us to have on-demand to the airport and everything. But I'd really love to see that be a policy priority moving forward and removing those barriers. Or, I don't know, convincing UTA to just give us a dedicated
Yeah.
line.
We will never say no to expanded access to transit and funding. So.
Okay, so then my second, almost all the positions I see in here are quoted at 10 months with benefits. Is that because we anticipate it will take into like February for us to hire and bring everyone on board? Or are some of them designed to be seasonal 10-month positions?
It's the turnaround time and getting a person hired and onboarded.
Is it possible then that means that the next fiscal year we should expect to see an increase
Correct.
again commensurate with those 2 months? Is it possible to see that increase stacked up so we can project and make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot for the next year?
We actually do.
We do have that?
For each position, yeah. So they will hire, the fiscal year begins July 1, and they'll advertise right away because you'll approve the FTEs, and then they hope to get the hiring process done during the month of July and August for a September 1 start.
And then we'll be able to understand what the difference is for next fiscal.
Yes, that
with the
we
full.
have. I think we have that for all of the employees, don't we, Allison? The full year's cost.
I would be really interested in seeing that maybe in one of our small group, please.
So you'd like a total of all of the new FTEs and what the cost difference is between the 10 versus the 12 months?
Yeah, just to make sure that we're not limiting
We might already have that,
ourselves too
but
much.
if not, we'll get it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Pui.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I will reiterate something that Chris Wharton said because I wrote it and I feel very strongly about. But if we're going to grow the department on the transportation side and the traffic mitigation, I want to see more things. So, I just want to make sure that we have the information. The public will want to see more things happening in that department. So, especially with the work done before I joined the city with the livable streets and all the traffic mitigation programs. So I just would like to follow up on that and what we expect to accomplish this next year with the extra positions, because it will be important to set the expectations right? If we're going to add 2 more people, I will feel comfortable if we can just put some boundaries on that. And then just to continue, the Fix the Bricks program is something that I felt very strongly about. I also struggle with the delay in the program, and I know that this is not, this is new into this department. I also, would like to see this analysis that was done on this department was done many years ago now, and we've learned a lot of things that's wrong with the program. And especially that not most of the people applying for it are not from low-income families. So I would like to look into this very carefully and make sure that we're doing it right and help those families. So we need to do probably more outreach, so more work on that, because this is very important. And just I'm going through my list of questions, and I know that I'm not giving you time to answer because I'm not expecting you. But if you feel like you want to answer any of them, please interrupt. But change the name of the Downtown Ambassadors, and I know that this is Downtown Alliance, but this is bigger than, and I know that you refer to the city ambassadors, and I appreciate that because they are more than just downtown now at this point. And I would like more information about, the youth city programs that we have, and how is it? I would like more information on that. What communities are representing? Not only numbers, but where do the kids come from? So I would like to know what neighborhoods are being served by this, so a little more information, so a little deeper than just there's 20 kids that are being served. There is also another thing that I would like to ask the administration to address. And I know that this has been mentioned, brought up to very recently, but the audit to building services and all the process, and I would like to, especially when we're growing, I would like to, many of those questions I struggle with. I don't struggle with the question, I struggle with the problem. So I would like us to make sure that we are being efficient and we are being faster, but at the same time smart. And the audit funded discovered some problems with this, and I would like us to address them. So it's important for me that we are learning from those. There's obviously many. I haven't finished reading the whole thing, so the recommendations are very clear on how we can improve, and I would like to see those addressed. So I think those are all mine. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Fowler.
Did you guys want to answer any of Alejandro's list? Oh, it was great.
Yeah, one item of clarification with the traffic calming. I'm not aware of an FTE in the transportation division at this time that is dedicated to that purpose. So our proposal here would be 2 FTEs that are pioneering the relaunch of the program. And to the capital question, as I mentioned earlier, our fingers are crossed that we'll be able to capitalize that through a couple of those different funding pots I mentioned. And then also the workload, if the 2 positions are funded and none or a lower portion than we'd hope for if capital is provided, there is enough of a CIP backlog to keep those 2 employees busy for a year. So that's the thinking and strategy on that. I appreciate the attention to and focus on Fix the Bricks. I was an old homeowner who was in the queue for 6+ years or something like that. And I guess if I could take a moment of privilege to say that I think Tony Milner, our housing stability director, is just one of the best program managers out there and a great asset to the city. And him and his team just have a great ability to wrap around public policy and equity issues and also federal guidelines that we're bound by. And I know from updates I've gotten that they've dove right in. They've hired the 2 positions to oversee that program. So I'm excited and hope you keep us accountable. And we will voluntarily offer that up as well about our backlog and the progress we're making at chipping away at that.
Thank you. So yeah, I do have a couple of questions. Tammy, you mentioned that one of the line items is the city ambassadors, which is great. I think that we all very much appreciate the city ambassadors and the expansion of them. And this may actually be more of a question for admin, I'm not sure, but you mentioned that the state's mitigation funds were earmarked for other activities. That's why it came as a request in this budget. And so I don't know if we can hear more about that other earmark or where we're going there. Not just so I am aware of where we need to fund things. We do know that this program works and is part of that mitigation idea, right? So, and I don't know if you want to answer. Andrew looks prepared, so come on up. You can sit next to me if you want. Did I scare you, Andrew?
For the rest of the council, no. There's a boundary there. Andrew Johnston, Director of Homelessness Policy and Outreach. The state homelessness mitigation fund formula allocates $2.75 million to us. The cost of PD alone would take all of that in one. So we've done the PD to 2 units in the PD plus some outreach positions, HART. So we have a business liaison position that we're going to double to another one to cover more of the city. So those ate up the entire 2.75, which is why we pulled out this to ask separately.
And perhaps you provided this for us, but would you be okay in providing just a breakdown in the future so I can look at what you're funding with the PD?
Yeah, definitely. We can get the PD and the other positions. I think all of it you're assuming?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
So
definitely we can get that to you.
What we're funding with the state mitigation. That'd be great.
Excellent. We will do that.
Thank you. And then the $500,000 from CIP maintenance, the projects that were listed off, I thought that those were projects that were proposed in the proposed bond for maintenance. And so I'm wondering, do we need the bond and the CIP to cover what we're anticipating as maintenance for those buildings?
Yes. We worked with the city's facilities division under public services to identify a large need that will go beyond what's being proposed through the bond.
I would be interested in a little bit more information there as well, because if we can cover it all with the bond, then then that frees up some other money, right? So I would be interested in a little more information on that, if maybe a small group meeting or something, if I could. I know we're all busy, but it should be quick. And then there was another question I had. Oh, this is just looking a little bit at the HEART program and the HEART budget to hopefully increase it a little bit. I work a lot with the HEART team, and they are doing a great amount of work out there. And I know that sometimes, as was mentioned earlier, Andrew mentioned this, that at the last resource fair, a community organization and the Boy Scouts provided lunch for participants, both for our communities or our members that are experiencing homelessness, to get some food while they're at our resource fair. And it would be nice if we already just had that in our budget to do, so that we don't have to depend necessarily. I mean, it's always great when people want to volunteer and donate, and we want to take that, but kind of look at that a little bit more, because the resource fairs really are successful, in my opinion, and they are doing really great work, and want to give a shout out to that team a lot, because so I want to, whatever I can do to look at their budget a little bit, and maybe see what we can do to provide a little bit more for them.
Thank you. We really appreciate that and appreciate the work they do. And thank you for your involvement with the resource fairs, kayak court being so involved.
I want to note that you had as many questions as I have.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember Mono.
Okay, I have far fewer questions than either of the previous two council members. But I do first want to say to my colleagues, thank you for all the questions you've asked, because they're all really great questions, and I'm excited. Your department does a lot of the things that I'm most interested in, planning for the future of our city and the growth that we're experiencing. So it's a really important department to me. I'm going to ask a very specific, nitpicky question, which is the civil enforcement officer for the enforcement on boarded buildings. I don't doubt that that's necessary. I am a tiny bit frustrated because I think this is now the third year that I've asked for us to update our consolidated fee schedule to get a fully loaded cost for owners of vacant and boarded buildings, and I understand that it's not happening again this year because we haven't quite figured that out. First of all, can we confirm that that's the case? But this seems like that civil enforcement officer should be able to be paid by those boarded and vacant building fees. So could I get an update on that when possible?
Yeah, we would have to liaison with Mary Beth and the finance office, but we'll add that to our list.
I don't doubt that that's a necessary thing, but I think that our fees to property owners that are maintaining boarded buildings or not maintaining vacant buildings more likely should be what's covering that officer.
And some work has been done on that. I've seen some emails going back and forth, so.
Thanks.
We'll follow up.
Yeah, we'll report back on that. And then that position as well will be doing those every fourth year required inspections, which is a healthy backlog, but we'll dig into that.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, the RDA is, I think we're here next month about helping with these boarded up buildings or vacant buildings downtown. So we as council members meet with property owners. We constantly, right, like pitching in that they do something about it, that there might be funding available. So keep that in mind as well when what he said with his enforcement officer, that there will be those, those opportunities out there for them, so that maybe we don't need one at the end of the day, or we can actually cover with those fees that they might will pay because they don't want to participate in making the buildings better. I have one more question about, I have a question before, but One of them, I think, is the community liaison. I think Tammy talked about it. Hold on. Here, okay. Community Commitment Program Special Project Coordinator. And it says that you move an existing FTE from ARPA to general fund. So this program was eligible for ARPA funds, and now you're saying, okay, we're kind of done with those funds, let's cover it with general funding. Those ARPA funds only covered for 1 year. I mean, is there any chance that you can continue that program with those ARPA funds for another year? Because it's the same program, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is it's hard to have, to take money out of the general fund because of ARPA. So if there's any possibility that it could continue to be funded with ARPA funding.
We could look into that. I don't know if there would be a year left with ARPA. Okay.
We checked into this a little bit because the question has come up from council members, and apparently there's such a heavy reporting requirement associated with ARPA, and the city doesn't want to get in a situation where they miss something or do something that isn't exactly correct and then end up losing the money and having to pay back money. So on some of the personnel, the positions that are very heavy in needing to interpret and document and that type of thing, that they've recommended moving them to the general fund. So I think that might be a factor in this one, but we'll find out.
Yeah, that would be nice because again, like I said earlier, we're trying to squeeze, right, and try to find solutions.
Yeah.
So if we could use that money for that, would be nice. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fowler.
Sorry, one last comment. And it's been said a couple of other times as well, but because we're politicians and like to hear ourselves talk. I did want to just say it with the different departments, the two that we've heard thus far, with some of the youth programs, I think Councilmember Mono brought this up, but again, with the Youth City, of really looking at the metrics of it, but also are we reinventing the wheel, and is there places to consolidate some of these programs or some of the things that we do or things along those lines? And that may not happen in the next 4.5 weeks or however long we have, but I think for the future, it's probably something that I'm interested in. It sounds like there's a few other council members that are interested in, because we do only have a limited budget, and if we're just reinventing all of the time, then I think we're wasting resources in some ways. And so I think that's a priority, to look at those different programs and how they interact with each other.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the briefing and the questions from the other council members. I have a few on top of the comments and questions. First, Orion, thank you very much on the permits. We've got 12,000. We've doubled the value of those permits from $1 billion to $2.4 billion. Housing units basically doubled over the last year, and you can see why you need more FTEs to support all those extra permits and requirements and inspections. And that's also what the businesses and the residents would also say, is that, hey, if we're going to add more, then hopefully the timeline on permits and the timeline on inspections comes down with that, because that's probably one of you hear them all the time, right? It takes a long time to get a permit from a number of people. So we want to be cognizant of the fact that, hey, if we add FTEs, we should see a result from that FTE with a reduction in time, I would say. But I appreciate those numbers, because I don't think people realize how many inspections you guys have done.
Yeah, and those building inspectors specifically, we get about 99% of our inspections done next business day, including fire inspections. So they have really been running their legs off to keep that record going.
Thank you very much. If those are good metrics that I think we need to elevate, because I hear of course I'm going to hear the complaints that it takes a long time to get something done. But if that's true, then that's wonderful. We need to continue pressing that, and I appreciate that very much. On that same line, do we have a program, or is there a program that we inspect rental units, inside rental units that have been that are not kept up to building codes or not kept up to safety codes? Is that part of our responsibility as a city?
Apartments.
Apartments.
Yeah, that's 4 or more units. Yeah.
And I just get just some concerns that residents don't understand where they need to turn to if their place is really uninhabitable and the landlord's not abiding by the codes.
Yeah, it hasn't been too long ago, I think 4 or 5 years, where we worked with the apartment association folks, and they clipped our wings locally about how many inspections we can do and how often. And so now we're to the point with that group, based upon legislation, we only inspect every 4th year.
Is there a possibility of, I mean, if someone has a bad, can they change that, or is there a way to have inspections that, hey, my house is flooded with garbage and it's not getting, is that?
It's a really complicated topic, but what we found during the last discussion with council was people are afraid to complain that their units are substandard or they'll end up out on the street. And so that's one issue that you have to take into consideration.
Okay, so I would.
The city does have a fit premise ordinance that can be used, but again, it's pretty obvious who called.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay, so it's kind of outside this topic here, but I think I would like to revisit that issue at a sooner than later date, but definitely after July 1st.
Sounds good.
And to the permitting comment, with our software that we have, to Orion's credit, he's implemented over 17 years at the city some highly sophisticated permitting process software. So if you ever get a complaint, we're happy to look up a building number, address, and we have the time spent with the city, the time spent with the applicant. So just know that offer is always on the table.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Yeah. Now just a couple transportation questions. On demand, I like the idea. I know we're still kind of doing a pilot program on the west side. I just want to make sure, I think that's going to end soon, because I know there's thoughts on expanding the on-demand program to other parts of the city. And I just want to get a briefing and understanding on when that's going to expand and, how well it's going, because I'd like to see it move forward on that end.
Okay, if it's helpful in our written responses to this, we could provide you with the existing geography and the expanded geography and the price point.
Okay.
Because I remember we fleshed that out last year. And
all right.
So.
On the FTN side of the house, is that increasing our head time on those routes, the east-west routes? Because I know a couple years ago we talked about, hey, we got to increase the FTNs and across the board from east to west or west to east, and we had a lull, of course. And now we're bringing it back on. Is that going to increase our head time or the bus services or the hours on the FTNs, those 4 east-west?
Yeah, let me check the hours with John. Yeah, come on up.
Yeah, so in 2019, the city-sponsored service started on routes 2, 9, and 21, and the 9 went from 30-minute headways to 15-minute headways, and then also expanded west. So now it goes through the Poplar Grove neighborhood all the way out to 4th South and Redwood Road. There was a short time period during COVID in which that was, the headways were, went back, to longer headways. But that was only for about 4 months in 2020. And UTA gave us basically a rebate because of that. And so since really last summer of, late summer of 2020, those 3 routes have been back running the way that they should. And that also includes evening and weekend service, including 30-minute service on Sundays. So the increase this year covers a brand new route, the Route 1, which connects along Redwood Road to 10th North, 9th West, South Temple to the U. So basically connecting Rose Park, downtown, and the U. And yeah, brand new route, but it has those FTN standards, which is 15 minutes all day, every day, with 30-minute service on Sundays. Great. Oh, sorry, John Larson, Transportation Director.
Thank you, John Larson, Transportation Director. Gotcha, appreciate that. I'm pretty bad with that. I apologize.
Ron Larson, Transportation Director, will be giving comments at the end of the mayor's Bike to Work Day tomorrow.
Right,
so
right.
Welcome you to join us.
So thank you very much. I appreciate it because I think the FTN basically, again, east-west connections, and that's a service that we're providing, and we can see where our money's going to, and I appreciate that. And the last thing, I think I'm just going to reiterate what Councilmember Fowler and Councilmember Mono says. We got 2 youth programs, 2 different departments. How do we make it efficient and consolidate and make it stronger with across the board? So appreciate all the comments. Councilmember Puy.
They sounded so annoyed. I don't know who manages Salt Lake City mobile app, and it's not within your department, or is it? Or
That runs through the HEART program.
program.
I'm going to look at Tony to confirm.
so, to your point about rental complaints, and there is a lot to be said that to be a point of contact, and the app has a way of communicating anonymously. So I would like to suggest that as an idea. Yesterday, on Friday, I reported a down sign, a UTA sign, and the response from that department was like, "It's not ours. Call this number from UTA." And sure, I called the number from UTA, but there are efficiencies to have one point of contact. While many of the issues with rental problems might not be ours, we could potentially be the person that says contact this department or contact this organization to help people report issues. So I just would like to suggest
Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that very much, Blake.
Thank you for the questions.
Have a good
All right.
afternoon.
Okay, Councilmember, everybody stand up. back, Salt Lake City. I hope you stretched out there. We're going to skip a couple and we're going to move on to the board appointments at this time. And we have a board appointment for the Sugar House Park Authority Board of Trustees. Sarah Shearer, she's on the line right now. Good evening, or afternoon, Sarah. And thank you for volunteering to be on a board. And it's always great to see volunteers for these most important boards. So tell us a little bit on why you want to be on the board.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I'm Sarah Shearer. I currently actually am the Chief of Human Resources for University of Utah Health. And I appreciate getting to meet with you guys. I think with COVID, I've actually been on the board for 3 years. So, and currently I'm serving as the treasurer. So I've really enjoyed my time in supporting our community and just being able to, you know, especially with the Sugar House Park, I think it's a great avenue for a community engagement, you know, places where people can come together. And just as we, you know, take that stewardship and really, you know, having events and going through it has just been a great opportunity and a privilege. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Is there any questions for Sarah at this time? You're off the hook there on questions. Oh.
I have a quick question. How have you been on the board for 3 years?
Well, that's a very good question. So I think we have waited and tried, and I'm sure with COVID, I don't really know. I don't know how that process goes, but I've been working on that since 2019 of May.
Wow. Okay. Well, I am sorry for the delay.
It's no worries. I was like, maybe they're going to kick me off. I don't know how tonight's going to go.
No, I'm glad to make it official. Yeah, sorry for the delay, and thanks for sticking it out while you were waiting for 3 years. That's weird.
Yes. Well,
it's no worries. There was a blip in the middle of it, so no worries.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your 3 years of service. You'll be on our consent agenda this evening, and there's no need to call in or watch us online, but you're more than welcome if you do so inclined. Appreciate that, and have a great night.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next board appointment with the Peanut Board, the Parks, Natural Land, Urban Forestry, and Trails. I always like to say that one out loud. Advisory Board. And we have Aaron Wiley here. And come on up and take a seat, Aaron. And again, thank you for volunteering. And it's great to see you here. And
Thank you.
It's always great to see someone in person. And tell us why you want to be on this Peanut Board.
Yeah, thank you everybody so much. The biggest reason why I want to be on this board is to continue to serve my community. I've spent probably the last 15 years through sports and recreation, encouraging a lot of the young people. I heard about this opportunity and spent a lot of time at parks. I'm probably one of the biggest end users of it all. And so when I heard about this opportunity, I knew it would be a great time for me to get involved and serve the community.
Awesome. Any questions for Aaron? Councilmember
I got to
Pedro.
say something.
I-
So I'm really proud of this because I asked Aaron to do this. He is the embodiment of what we want our parks to be. He took my son and all of his cohorts who were fresh off of COVID anxiety, relearning how to engage with each other, and turned them into a cohesive baseball team. The man at the end of every practice names one thing that they do well and encourages them to improve on another thing. It is absolutely, through Rose Park Baseball, which is primarily where I know Aaron from, it is the youth development, community building, enjoyment of outdoor spaces in safe, sustainable ways. And even though I could comment on something silly like how he cost saves by avoiding shampoo and cleaning his hair with bleach, I'm gonna focus instead on the amazing work he does through our park system and how appreciative I am of your willingness to sacrifice your time for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have no other questions or comments, so appreciate it. Appreciate your volunteering. I appreciate your effort on this board and your engagement. It's always wonderful to see that. So you will also be on our consent agenda this evening during our formal session. No need to call in or be there. So thank you very much for your evening, and thank you for your engagement.
You're welcome.
Have
Thank
a great
you all.
night. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Moving on to the next board appointment for the Arts Council, and we have Cale Newhouse here also. Cale, good evening. Evening, afternoon.
Yep.
Thank you very much again for volunteering, and appreciate you being here in person. It's always great to see a face not on a flat screen.
I do enough Zooms all day, so it's,
So it's great. It's wonderful. So tell us a little about why you want to be on the board.
yeah, I'm
council.
honestly very excited to join the Arts Council. I think they're doing a lot of great work already, and my family and I benefit from a lot of the programs that they put on. I think we're frequent attenders of the Living Traditions Festival and the Twilight Concert Series. In addition, I mean, every single year I try to recruit people to come and work at the same bank as I, and I'd like to be able to point to various arts facilities that are in the city, and it's what makes this a vibrant metropolitan area. And so I'm excited to help contribute to those causes as well. I've lived in the downtown area for going on 13, 14 years, and I've seen it develop, and I'm excited to help.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Any questions, comments for Cale? All right. You're off the hook easy, too.
Great.
So, again, you're on the consent agenda for this evening at 7 o'clock. You need not be present to win, so enjoy your evening then.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good evening.
All right. Moving on to the HR department. Deb, you ready? And let's go through the fiscal year 2022-23 budget for the HR department. We have Ben Lutke, and we have Deb Alexander, and I saw David's right next to David. If you need to, or you can come on up if you want to.
He'll come up for the other one.
Okay, gotcha. All right, it's all yours, Deb.
In the budget book, you can find HR key changes on page 40. The overview is on page 177, and the staffing document is 267. The total budget for HR is $54.3 million. This is a $2 million increase over fiscal year 2022, which would be 4% increase. The increase includes 5 new full-time employees. And of note, one of them would be dedicated to the apprenticeship program. So it would be a standard centralized process for all of the departments. Currently, each of the departments are taking on some of that work themselves. Another one of the employees would be dedicated to the police department. This was brought up during the police briefing that there's 2 positions, one in PD, one in HR, both dedicated to recruitment and hiring of the police department employees. And I'll turn it over to Deb for her presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, council members. And thank you for your time today. My presentation is very brief, so we'll get right on it. One of the things you may recognize in the presentation is a continuation to try to build HR staffing to acceptable professional levels. And I'm going to talk a little more about that here in a minute. Can I look at your slides as you move them? So I'll know which slide I'm on.
So we're doing HR instead of compensation. If you can pull up the HR presentation.
Ben.
Scott, did you hear that? Okay, good, thanks.
There we go. Those oranges look familiar. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about, what we've done with the staffing and from last year. But before I do that, I want to talk about what is the scope of the HR department, because sometimes it's not very clear, right? What is it that we actually do? So we actually participate in all hiring, in all compensation, in delivering great benefits to employees, in dealing with internal issues when something is happening in the department that needs to be corrected. Basically, we serve all the departments in the city, and we are the only department that serves HR needs in the city. Other departments will have internal staff that perform some of their functions, but HR staff all reside in HR. So, as I mentioned, I want to tell you a little about what we've done with the staffing we had last year. You may know the city's in the process of implementing.
Mr. Chair. Sorry, Deb, you have to tell them to move to the next slide.
Oh,
Because
sorry.
even if you push it, we can't see
Oh,
it. so.
sorry.
Thank you, Amy,
That's
because you're looking straight at it. Appreciate that.
Look at that.
Do you want the next slide?
Thank you. Yeah, it was a good slide. That was the one I talked about a minute ago. There we go. Now we're all on the same page. Thank you. So here's a quote from the way we described the biggest project that HR has really ever implemented. And it was the largest project in human resources history, was kicked off this year with the workday implementation. And one of the things I would like to tell the council about that is that my folks are excited. They're like beyond excited about the implementation of Workday. They are stoked. And one of the things that's also the case is that every single person in HR has had a role in the implementation of Workday. Without the staffing we received last year, specifically with regard to an HRIS, which is HR Information Systems personnel, there would be no way we would be implementing this. We are scheduled to bring up most of the modules in July, and like I say, it's really been a team effort. People are really excited about it. New slide, please. Oh, yay, it changed. Secondly, one of our major initiatives this year, and some of you may remember this was a focus for us last year, was to do everything we can to streamline our recruitment process. The biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges the city faces, and probably from an HR perspective, maybe the biggest challenge the city faces, is finding the people to fill our positions. And it's a big challenge, and it's not going away anytime soon. So one of the key elements to that is to make the process as fast and responsive and thorough as possible so that we can get those positions filled. We don't have the means right now, probably will next year, but we don't have the means right now to measure how much we've reduced the time it takes to actually recruit for positions. But the feedback we've been receiving from department heads and mid-level managers is really positive. A lot of excitement about, hey, we're getting the help we need, and we're really pleased about that. Additionally, in this last year, as you know, HR played a large role in the management of helping our employees work through COVID. And there's some things that came along with that, and some of that was the number of FMLA applications that we processed in 2021 increased to 848, which was up from about 500. Now, some of those are going to be related to COVID, but not all of them. And some of them are going to be related to things that we know that came with COVID, which were the mental health challenges that many of our employees faced. Additionally, we've helped the departments with a large number of ADA accommodations and lots of, let's see, I lost my train of thought. Oh, departmental leaves of absence. So one of the things, and Chief Brown talked a little about it, is we have employees who are, for one reason or another, unable to be in the workplace. So one way that we try to help the departments work through that in a safe and compliant way is to help them go into light work situations. So those of you who were on the council last year saw this exact slide. Oh, new slide. Sorry, keep forgetting. Those of you who were on the council last year saw the same slide. It's been updated for our present situation. And what it talks about is professional staffing standards throughout the country. There's a group that surveys lots and lots and lots of organizations all through the country. And one of the things, they do multiple disciplines, but one of the things they ask about is how many HR people do you have for the size of your company or your organization. And the recommendations are, and they've changed quite a bit in the last 5 years. Some of the reasons for that is that increased compliance, increased need for departmental assistance in terms of helping managers deal with issues in the workplace. It used to be that the kind of general rule was that for every 100 employees you would want to have one HR person. And now, in the last 5 years, that's changed to be 1.4. So you can see the math. Basically, if we do a conservative estimate, it would indicate that we are significantly still understaffed and will be even if these budget requests are granted. And I can talk about the reason for that, but I'm going to move on and talk a little about the positions. New slide. Hey, I remembered. Okay. The first request that we're making is for an employee or an HR employee relations manager. What an employee relations manager does and will do is supervise the people who are actually directly embedded into the departments. So since 2007, the number of business partners in the city has stayed the same, despite the fact that the number of departments in the city has grown significantly. So our request this year is to address that. And this individual will have supervisory responsibility for the business partners. And when I talk about business partners, what I mean is the person from HR who is assigned to the department. For example, in the police department, our business partner who's assigned there works only on PD types of things. The second position on the list is a senior technician, and this position is requested because we're going to have a lot of updates, particularly to job descriptions, as we move them into Workday. The old recruiting system allowed those job descriptions not necessarily to be updated quite as much. Workday will require it because we'll be recruiting out of Workday. I've already, the next position is the HR recruiter for police. This is a recommendation from the rep committee. I was watching Chief Brown earlier. He talked about how there were two positions. One was the outreach coordinator, one was the recruiter. This position in HR will handle the actual work of recruitment, managing the applications, setting the appointments, getting people in for testing, kind of doing the onboarding for the folks who are joining in PD. So this is a dedicated recruiter for PD, which was, again, one of the recommendations. And then I've talked a little bit about the business partner and why we have a need for that. And then finally, as Ben mentioned, we're asking for a recruiter to manage or help manage the apprentice program. And as he said, the departments are all working on that kind of on their own, and it makes a lot better sense to have it centralized and have one person, one group of folks responsible for that. The reason it's a recruiter position is because our recruiters routinely, when they're recruiting for city employees, our recruiters routinely run across people who would be really great in an apprentice program. So we will have a large role in helping manage that function too, but that's why that position is a recruiter. Thank you. Done.
Thank you, Deb. Any questions for Deb?
I do. It's related to space, and I know that this is a facilities question, and I see that from the staff report that there is potentially enough space at Plaza 349 for this, but this is probably a question for the administration in general, as far as like the proposed new FTEs, and making sure that we are thinking about space and we're thinking about the new ways of working. Apparently, we have learned probably one of the maybe positive things, very few positive things that have happened because of COVID is that we learned that some people could work well from home. in a hybrid, way, coming to the office once in a while and working from home sometimes too. And our building is not set up like that. We have, spaces with name tags and dedicated desk space. And while we are growing, I want to make sure that we're thinking about the space, and maybe we need to think about rethinking how our office space is thought out. So maybe more communal spaces and whatnot. I just want to make sure the administration is thinking about this, and I'm sure they are, but I want to voice my concern and support for looking forward into how we work together in this very old building.
Thank you for that. We've actually been working on a plan to accommodate the reality that many of our staff are going to be working in a hybrid manner from here on out. I'm supportive of it. I've actually always been supportive of it. What we will have is folks who are in the office 2 or 3 days a week. I mean, we'll have some folks who need to be, for example, at the front desk, and there has to be coverage for that all the time. But what we're looking at is taking some of our office space and making it that communal space. So for the days, for example, a recruiter is in the office, they have a place to actually sit their laptop, work away, attend the meetings they need to attend. And while maybe not having an office directly assigned only to them. And we've got 2 or 3 groups internal in HR where we think that we can make that work. So we're working on that right now. Yeah.
Councilman Armano.
Thanks, Deb. Just a question on, so it's a proposed department of 36 employees, and of that, and the department budget is almost 55 million, and I think the biggest thing is not employee related. Can you just give, for me and the public, a little overview of the 49.8 million that is called risk management and what that means and what, because that's the biggest part of your budget.
It's definitely the biggest part, yeah. So the 36, if the positions are approved, there'd be 36 position or FTEs in HR. One of those is the Civilian Review Board Administrator. So that doesn't technically count as an HR person, at least when it comes to the staffing standards we put up. The largest piece of the budget, by far, is that health insurance is included there. And in fact, all the insurance programs are going to show up in the risk portion of HR's budget.
And does that also include like the ancillary benefits or the voluntary benefits and the cost of administering those in that risk management, or that's a separate?
Most of them are in there, yeah. Is my benefits administrator saying no?
I'm getting a
she's
different
agreeing.
different direction head nods from people in the audience. But.
She's agreeing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's enough clarity for me today, but thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I have no other questions, and I think it's been wonderful briefing. And I want to do the compensation, but can we do it as quick as we just did the?
I think that's the plan.
Okay. All right. Let's go for it.
To be
So
fair,
we're-
Mr. Chair, I don't think it's the presenters that make things long. I think it's the 7 of us.
So true. Okay, we're moving on. So we're moving backwards now in time. We're going to item number 4 with the fiscal year 2022-23 budget, proposed compensation for the city employees. And we have David Salazar also joining Deb and Ben. So kick it away, Ben.
The compensation budget for the general fund is $258 million. This is 61% of the overall general fund budget. Most of the city's budget goes to people who provide the services for the public. This is an increase of $29 million, or 13% over fiscal year 2022. The reasons for the increase are many, but in particular, a competitive job market, the higher rates of turnover that the city has been experiencing, and inflationary impacts. There is a color-coded table on page 5 of the staff report, and it shows the turnover rates by department covering the last 4 years. And there has been an increase in the last year. Broadly speaking, there are 4 categories of salary increases that make up most of the increase. These are merit increases for represented employees. These are previously agreed upon based on years of service. Next are negotiated increases for represented employees, and note that some of these negotiations are currently ongoing. The third is a general pay increase of 4.5% for non-represented city employees. And the last is market-based adjustments for non-represented employees who are lagging the local pay rates. You may remember there was a briefing back in March about the salary survey for non-represented employees, and those findings informed these recommendations. Some other significant changes to note. The budget includes the second phase to implement a $15 minimum living wage for city employees. The budget would also add long-term disability for all city full-time employees. This is currently a voluntary opt-in program. This would change it to be available to all full-time employees. And one other change of note is adding Juneteenth as a paid city holiday to the annual compensation plan. It would be observed on Monday, June 20th this year, since the holiday falls on a Sunday. And I'll turn it over to the Compensation Program Manager, David Salazar, for his short presentation.
And I will keep it short, I promise. I will keep it short. You have a lot of information packed into that staff report, and I'm not going to regurgitate that for you because you have that already before you. But what I would like to highlight for you is some supplemental information that I think will be helpful to give you some insight as to how our compensation system is set up and how it works for employees. Our employees, of course, are, and I know I don't need to tell you this, our greatest asset, and I really believe that. And I stand behind that in what I do in my role as the compensation manager for the city. It's the biggest, if not the biggest, it's one of the biggest line items in the budget, 2/3 of that budget, like Ben said. And so what we do, of course, enables us to be more successful at attracting and retaining the talent that we depend on to run Salt Lake City and to provide those services to residents and visitors and businesses who depend and look to us for that help. Let's go to the next slide really quick. I just wanted to highlight a great success that I feel like we have accomplished here in the city, which was highlighted earlier this year, and that was announcing the fact that we had, in fact, achieved pay equity. And when we talk about equity, there's internal equity, there's external equity, and all of those things are important. But to be able to call out the fact that amongst our employees, what we have achieved is pretty significant. And we have that in place, well in place among our union represented employees, but now we can say that with a great degree of confidence that we have that also for our non-represented group of employees. And that's something we'll continue to work towards in all that we do and how we administer compensation for the city. Next slide. Now our employees are broken out into different groups. The smallest of those groups, about 1/3 or so, are non-represented. And so, as Ben mentioned, the mayor's budget proposes a 4.5% general increase for those employees. That includes our department directors and other appointed staff, elected officials, and all of our non-represented employees, which basically consist of our professional and paraprofessional group of employees. You also have in the budget recommendations from both the NFP report and the CCAC, who earlier this year provided information that would be important and necessary for us to be able to stay competitive, and much more so than we have in the past, bringing salaries closer to market so that they're not lagging any more than 2%. Next slide. For our union employees, again, our AFSCME employees, there are about 1,000 or so employees represented by this group. We do, in fact, have a ratified agreement. I don't think I've ever been able to come before this council and report the fact that we actually have a ratified agreement with AFSCME before this presentation is being made, and so that was a great success this year for us to be able to come to that agreement with them. But they are slated to receive the same 4.5% increase that has been proposed for our non-represented group of employees. And I also want to make note that in addition to that general increase, many of those employees will see merit step increases. And these are increases, understand, that they achieve for the time that they're in their positions. And the wage structure for each one of the subgroups that we have differs. We have entry pay rates, a 1-year rate and a 3-year rate, and it's all based on time and position. And when they receive those increases, they aren't as frequent as they once were. They're not every year, but perhaps every other year. And so they range anywhere between 6 all the way up to 17% of an increase when they do receive those pay amounts. So that's something for you to be aware of as well. Next slide. Similarly, not this year, but last year, we actually achieved a multi-year agreement with our firefighters. And so we have proposed for them in this budget a 3% general pay increase, which is what was set up. Just looking to make sure we're on the right slide. For our firefighters, that includes our EMTs, our paramedics, our specialists, engineers, hazmat, those type, and our fire captains. And similarly, not all of them, but again, based on their time and position, they will see merit step increases that range anywhere between 6 to 23%, or 23.5%. Finally, next slide. With the police officers, that is the one group for whom we are still in negotiations, so nothing has yet been nailed down. We're hoping that that's something that we can achieve soon. But like the other union and group of employees, those police officers, when they receive or eligible to receive their step pay increases, will see an increase or adjustment anywhere between 6 all the way up to 17.5%. And so again, everything and anything that we can do to try to retain the talent by making sure that our wages are competitive is a major focus of this budget and all that we do.
Thank you, David. That was quick. Any questions? Mike? My question is on the, thank you very much, and I appreciate both presentations, and I don't want to get the idea that compensation in HR is not important by not asking questions, because compensation, and when 61% of your budget is on people, our most valuable asset in any company or business, right? We don't run without us. It's vital that we make sure that we do it right. And my one question is about turnover. You know, we have some high areas of turnover in some of the departments. And also, you know, if you have a small department, you know, 50% turnover could be just one person. So, I mean, you got to take the percentages with the hard numbers. But I'm always concerned because turnover costs money. And, but there's also, you know, it could be some issues there why we have a high turnover rate. And is HR, how is HR helping departments on their turnover rate? Or what are we doing on that question area?
Well, the major ways that we're helping is the changes in compensation that we've been advocating for, because that's a component of it, right? That people were leaving the city to go to jobs that were paying better. And the last couple of years, that's been the bulk of the recommendations, and specifically, as David mentioned, the one that was done in March when we talked about compensation for non-represented employees. So that's one major way. The other major way is that the city, and you may remember that the person who delivered that presentation talked about surveys that identify benefits for employees and what they look like, and are they good or are they less than good? And you may remember, and there's been multiple surveys that sort of come up with the same answer, but the answer is the city is who everyone else is chasing, right? When it comes to benefits, the city's doing a magnificent job. So that's another way we help. One of the things we also note is that the city was not immune to the Great Resignation, right, that we've read about, organizations across the world probably, people who were in the face of COVID saying to themselves, why am I doing this anymore, right? So I think that was a major component of why we would see turnover in the last couple of years particularly. So.
Okay, thank you, because I'm always, and I know you not focused on it, but you're always aware of that turnover rate to make sure it's not, gets extreme on either end, because there's some health to some turnover.
Yeah.
Right, a fine
Yeah.
line. So, Councilmember Petro.
It's not so much a question for them, but procedurally, can I advocate for HR in future budget sessions to be pushed closer to the beginning? It feels like so much of their data is foundational to what the rest of the department's decision makings are predicated on. And so I feel like I don't really have a lot of questions for them because they're actually answering a lot of questions that I've been carrying since other departments. So if possible, I'd like to get their framework earlier in budget discussions.
Okay, we'll take a look at that next year. Oh, yes. Any other questions? Wonderful. Appreciate that very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right.
Appreciate you.
So, Council, I know you're all excited about this, but we have a closed session.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we enter into closed session for purposes of labor negotiations and attorney-client matters.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler, a second from Councilmember Pui. Any discussion on this item? Seeing no discussion on this item, I will roll call this. Councilmember Fowler.
Yes.
Pui.
Yes.
Wharton.
Yes.
Mano.
Yes.
Lallamorse.
Yes.
Petro.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes unanimously 7-0, and we'll go into closed session here in a second.
Anyone can have an accident, but lying makes it worse.
But Mom will be upset.
She'll be even more upset if you lie. And how would you feel if Billy got punished? Face up to what you've done. Don't take the easy way out.
We'll tell her we did it.
Remember, it's better to tell the truth.
And that's no lie. Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
I'm Herbert K. Masters, attorney at law. Don't worry, I'm here to help. Do you suffer from coughing fits, chest congestion, runny nose, headache, or death? Then you might be the victim of poor air quality and the inversion layer that plagues Salt Lake City. But you have rights. You're entitled to clean air, and I'm here to help you fight for it. For more information, simply visit the website at the bottom of your screen. And remember, Keep it idle-free. That's IDLEFREE.
Heads up, Utah. Here's how bicyclists and drivers can work together to keep everyone safe on and around our roadways. Bicyclists, make sure to wear reflective gear that drivers can easily
To talk about her budget priorities as we head into the next fiscal year. Our History Minute is about the early bike lobbyists who got the streets in Salt Lake City paved. But before we get to those, let's take a look at our legislative update, our lookbacks, and take a look at road construction.
At its May 3rd meeting, the City Council heard the mayor deliver her annual address for her proposed budget, discussed further options for new district boundaries, and renamed the city's Housing and Neighborhood Development Division as the Housing Stability Division. At its May 10th meeting, the City Council received a budget overview for the next fiscal year and voted unanimously to enhance the safety of Salt Lake City by changing the standard speed to 20 miles per hour on all streets unless otherwise posted. To learn more, visit slc.gov/council. Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall and the city's Urban Forestry Division planted trees at Rose Park Elementary School with kindergarten students and faculty in celebration of Arbor Day.
These trees are going to make a giant wall of shade on the playground, on the soccer field here in the hot afternoons in summer. It's going to be like a wall of green trees.